Alchemy Road by Rocko Williams. Read the article or download the free PDF at mastmatrix.com. Please like and subscribe for more content. The purpose and scope of an alchemical history. Alchemy has long been treated as a relic of a pre-scientific world, yet its influence stretches across thousands of years and multiple civilizations. While often misunderstood as a primitive attempt at chemistry, alchemy functioned as a complex philosophical worldview that sought to bridge matter and spirit. Its symbols and operations reflected an effort to understand the universe as an interconnected system. This article aims to restore the depth and seriousness of that inquiry. The scope of alchemy extends from prehistoric metallurgy to Egyptian temple rites, Greek philosophical synthesis, Islamic scientific refinement, and medieval Christian adaptation. Each of these cultures contributed unique layers of meaning to the developing tradition. Thus, alchemy is best understood not as a fixed doctrine but as a dynamic lineage shaped by shifting intellectual climates. The methods used by alchemists were equally diverse. Ritual, meditation, laboratory experiment, and mythological storytelling all served as vehicles for exploration. These approaches reveal an underlying belief that transformation, whether physical or spiritual, is governed by universal principles. Alchemy used the processes of nature as metaphors for the development of the human soul. By tracing these developments across history, we gain insight into how alchemy became a comprehensive map of consciousness. Its emphasis on inner purification and transcendence shaped mystical traditions throughout the world. Understanding its evolution also helps clarify how scientific, religious, and esoteric ideas have historically intersected. This article offers an academically grounded narrative that integrates archaeological, textual, and philosophical evidence. It situates alchemy within global intellectual history, showing how each era reinterpreted its principles to fit new social and spiritual contexts. By doing so, the article provides a coherent foundation for understanding alchemy as a transformative system that has influenced religion, science, and philosophy alike. Defining alchemy across cultures and eras. Alchemy is difficult to define because it operated simultaneously as a spiritual discipline, a philosophical system, and a proto-scientific practice. In Egypt, it was a sacred art tied to the gods and temple rituals. In Greece, it blended with metaphysics and cosmology. In the Islamic world, it took the form of methodical laboratory science. In Europe, it became a vehicle for Christian mysticism and symbolic theology. These variations show how adaptable alchemy was across cultures. Despite these differences, certain themes appear consistently. All alchemical traditions revolve around the idea of transformation, whether of metals, consciousness, or the cosmos itself. This principle united practitioners across centuries and regions. The processes described in alchemical texts use the language of matter to convey insights about the human soul and its purification. Another shared concept is correspondence between macrocosm and microcosm. Alchemists believed that the same forces shaping the heavens also shaped the body and mind. This worldview allowed them to interpret natural processes as reflections of spiritual ones. Their laboratories were therefore both physical spaces and symbolic theaters for interchange. The symbolic nature of alchemical language has often obscured its meaning. Many texts intentionally conceal their teachings behind metaphors, myths, and coded imagery. This was done to protect esoteric knowledge from misuse and to ensure that only prepared students could grasp its deeper insights. As a result, alchemy developed a reputation for secrecy. Understanding these layers helps clarify why alchemy cannot be reduced to superstition or primitive science. It represented a sophisticated attempt to articulate the unity between physical reality and spiritual truth. By examining how different cultures defined and practiced alchemy, we uncover a long-standing tradition that sought to harmonize human aspiration with the natural order of the world. Proto-alchemy and prehistoric metallurgy and ritual symbolism. The origins of alchemy stretch back to the earliest human encounters with metal. When ancient peoples discovered how fire could transform raw ore into shining tools and ornaments, they witnessed a process that must have seemed miraculous. This ability to alter the fundamental nature of matter inspired myths about divine fire and celestial craft. Early metallurgy was therefore not merely a technological breakthrough but a spiritual revelation. Archaeological evidence shows that metalworking was often associated with ritual specialists. These individuals occupied liminal roles within their societies, mediating between the human world and supernatural forces. Their workshops functioned as sacred spaces where transformation occurred through controlled interaction with heat, minerals, and the Earth's hidden resources. The symbolism of transformation took root long before codified alchemical texts emerged. Early myths describe gods who forged weapons, shaped worlds, and purified souls through fire. These narratives reflect a proto-alchemical worldview that saw matter as alive with potential. The act of smelting became a metaphor for spiritual refinement, suggesting that humans could also be purified and strengthened. As metal technologies evolved, so did their symbolic meanings. Bronze, copper, iron, and gold each acquired associations with planets, deities, and stages of spiritual development. These correspondences later became central to formal alchemical theory. In this sense, the foundations of alchemy were laid not in libraries or laboratories but in the hearths and furnaces of prehistoric artisans. The prehistoric roots of alchemy show that transformation has always fascinated the human imagination. By linking material change to mythic and spiritual ideas, early cultures established a worldview in which nature's processes reveal deeper truths. This symbolic framework set the stage for the sophisticated alchemical systems that would arise in Egypt, Greece, and beyond. The birth of metallurgical mysticism in the ancient Near East. In the ancient Near East, metalworkers held a status approaching priesthood. Their ability to manipulate fire and/or link them to gods associated with craftsmanship, war, and cosmic order. Cultures such as the Sumerians, Akkadians, and early Anatolians viewed these artisans as intermediaries between the material and divine worlds. Their craft embodied a sacred knowledge that blurred the line between technology and magic. The region's myths frequently depict divine smiths shaping the destiny of gods and humans alike. Figures such as Kothar wa Kausis in Canaanite lore or the craftsman gods of Mesopotamia reinforce the idea that creation itself was an act of sacred transformation. These narratives supported the belief that mastering fire granted insight into the workings of the cosmos. Metalworkers guarded their knowledge through initiation rites and lineage-based transmission. This emphasis on secrecy mirrors later alchemical traditions, where teachings were reserved for chosen students. The symbolic language surrounding metalwork also evolved into early metaphors for spiritual purification, immortality, and cosmic harmony. The Near East contributed not only myths but also a conceptual framework involving elemental theory and the properties of metals. These ideas were later integrated into Greek natural philosophy, providing the philosophical foundation for alchemy. The belief that metals matured within the earth, progressing toward perfection, became a core doctrine of transmutation theory. Understanding metallurgical mysticism in the Near East helps illuminate how spiritual interpretations of matter shaped early intellectual history. The connection between metalwork and divine power established a cultural context in which alchemy could later emerge. This early worldview laid the groundwork for the symbolic and philosophical systems that would develop in Egypt and the Greco-Roman world. Mesopotamian crafts, divine metals, and the first transmutation myths. Mesopotamia provides some of the earliest written evidence linking material processes to spiritual ideas. In Sumerian and Akkadian texts, metals were described as gifts of the gods, each with specific celestial associations. Gold symbolized the sun's perfection, silver the purity of the moon, and copper the vitality of Venus. These symbolic connections reveal an early belief in correspondence between heaven and earth. Craftsmen in Mesopotamia performed rituals to invoke divine assistance before working with metal. These rites framed metallurgy as a sacred act requiring alignment with cosmic forces. The tools, furnaces, and ores were considered embodiments of divine energies, reinforcing the notion that transformation was a mystical process. Mesopotamian myths also contain early notions of transmutation. Legends speak of gods who altered the forms of beings or substances to achieve cosmic balance. These stories provided imaginative templates for later theories that metals could evolve or be perfected. Although not yet formal alchemy, such myths indicate a cultural readiness for the idea of material transformation. The region's influence extended through trade networks and shared intellectual traditions. Elemental concepts, numerical symbolism, and planetary correspondences traveled widely, contributing to the cross-pollination of ideas across the ancient world. These exchanges helped shape the philosophical environment that would give rise to Hermetic and Greek alchemical systems. Mesopotamian thought established key themes that echoed throughout alchemical history: the divine origin of metals, the sacred nature of craft, and the belief in transformation as a cosmic principle. These ideas provided a foundation for the later synthesis of Egyptian temple science and Greek philosophy. By tracing these early roots, we gain a clearer understanding of how alchemy emerged as a unified tradition that sought to unravel the mysteries of matter and spirit through symbolic and practical means. Egyptian temple science and sacred chemistry. Egyptian civilization played a foundational role in shaping alchemy's conceptual and ritual framework. In Egypt, craft traditions were inseparable from religious life, and the manipulation of materials was considered an extension of divine creation. Priests and artisans worked within temple complexes where metallurgy, medicine, embalming, and pigment making were bound to sacred cosmology. These practices reflected a worldview in which matter was infused with spiritual significance and purification was both a physical and metaphysical process. The Egyptians believed that transformation was central to existence. The cycles of the Nile, the rebirth of the sun god Ra, and the resurrection of Osiris all reinforced the notion that nature operated through continuous renewal. This belief influenced their approaches to mummification, healing, and ritual preparation, each of which required precise knowledge of substances and their energetic properties. Such knowledge contributed early principles later incorporated into alchemical thought. Egypt's temple laboratories employed techniques that would later appear in alchemical texts, including distillation, calcination, and the preparation of mineral compounds. These methods were not conducted for material gain but for spiritual and ceremonial purposes. Sacred chemistry aimed to maintain cosmic order, ensure the immortality of the soul, and connect practitioners with divine forces. In this environment, the line between ritual and experiment became indistinguishable. Egyptian symbolism also profoundly shaped later esoteric traditions. Colors, metals, and minerals carried metaphysical meanings, and deities like Thoth governed knowledge, writing, and the hidden arts. This symbolic language created a framework in which matter was viewed as a reflection of celestial principles. When Greek philosophers encountered Egyptian traditions, they interpreted these symbols through the lens of metaphysics, forming the basis of Hermeticism. The fusion of Egyptian ritual science with philosophical inquiry in later centuries produced a system that viewed transformation as a universal law. This legacy positioned Egypt as one of the earliest and most influential sources of alchemical thought. Understanding its contributions is essential for grasping how alchemy evolved into a discipline that blended practical craft with spiritual aspiration across cultures and eras. The role of Thoth, Heka, and the emergence of Hermetic thinking. Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom, writing, and hidden knowledge, became a central figure in the evolution of alchemical philosophy. He was believed to have authored sacred texts containing the secrets of creation and transformation. These teachings, guarded within temple sanctuaries, shaped the intellectual atmosphere in which later Hermetic writings would emerge. Through Thoth, alchemy gained an association with divine instruction and the pursuit of spiritual refinement. Another key concept in Egyptian religion was Heka, the force of divine magic that animated the cosmos. Heka represented the power underlying all natural processes, enabling matter to transform and life to renew itself. This notion provided a metaphysical explanation for the workings of nature, framing transformation as a manifestation of sacred energy. Later Hermetic texts adopted this view, presenting the universe as a living system governed by intelligible laws. The merging of Thoth and the Greek Hermes during the Ptolemaic period marked a turning point. Greek scholars interpreted Egyptian sacred science through their philosophical frameworks, creating a syncretic tradition known as Hermeticism. In this tradition, Thoth Hermes became the archetypal sage who revealed the hidden structure of the cosmos and the means by which humans could ascend toward divine knowledge. This fusion established the basis for alchemical cosmology. Hermetic thinking emphasized the unity of spirit and matter, suggesting that understanding the material world was inseparable from understanding oneself. This view transformed earlier ritual practices into a system of metaphysical inquiry. The Hermetic writings presented creation as a series of emanations from a divine source, each level reflecting universal principles. These ideas resonated with alchemists seeking to map the processes of transformation both within nature and within the soul. Through Thoth and the concept of Heka, Egyptian religion contributed profound philosophical depth to later alchemical systems. These ideas helped shape a worldview in which knowledge was both sacred and practical, a means of aligning the individual with the underlying order of the cosmos. This legacy became the intellectual foundation for the Hermetic literature that would flourish in Hellenistic Alexandria. Alchemy in Egyptian mortuary rituals and the myth of Osiris and regeneration. Mortuary rituals in ancient Egypt provide some of the earliest symbolic models for alchemical transformation. The mummification process involved a series of purification and preservation stages that mirrored the cycles of death and rebirth in Egyptian mythology. By preparing the body for eternity, priests enacted a ritual transformation that symbolized the soul's journey toward renewal. These rites reinforced the idea that matter could be refined and elevated through sacred intervention. The myth of Osiris further shaped the spiritual vocabulary of alchemy. Osiris, the god who was dismembered and resurrected, embodied the principle of regeneration. His narrative illustrated that dissolution was a necessary precursor to rebirth. This theme became central to later alchemical texts, which often described the breaking down of substances as an essential step toward perfection. Osiris thus provided a mythological model for the alchemical stages of death, purification, and restoration. Materials used in embalming also held symbolic significance. Resins, salts, oils, and minerals were applied to maintain the integrity of the body, reflecting an understanding of matter as capable of transformation through divine guidance. These substances were believed to possess both physical and spiritual properties, a concept echoed in the alchemical idea of dual-aspect matter. Such beliefs paved the way for interpreting chemical operations as metaphors for inner refinement. The funerary rites demonstrated a holistic approach to transformation, uniting physical processes with cosmological meaning. Each step, from cleansing to wrapping, symbolized metaphysical truths about the soul's progress toward immortality. The rituals were performed within a framework that viewed the cosmos as a system of interconnected forces, governed by principles that later became central to Hermetic philosophy. Alchemy inherited from Egypt the notion that transformation was fundamentally spiritual. The regeneration of Osiris offered a narrative blueprint for the alchemical quest to transcend decay and achieve perfection. By embedding these ideas in both ritual practice and mythic symbolism, the Egyptians provided a conceptual foundation that would inform the development of alchemy across later cultures. The fusion of Greek philosophy with Egyptian esotericism. The meeting of Greek philosophical inquiry and Egyptian sacred science gave rise to one of history's most influential intellectual traditions. When Greek scholars entered Egypt after Alexander's conquest, they encountered a sophisticated symbolic system linking matter, spirit, and cosmic order. Greek thinkers interpreted these traditions through the lens of their philosophical frameworks, particularly Platonism and Stoicism, which emphasized metaphysics and the rational structure of the universe. This encounter transformed earlier Egyptian concepts into a more abstract and philosophical system. Greek writers interpreted the temple sciences as embodiments of universal laws rather than localized religious practices. They saw in Egyptian rituals a symbolic language describing the structure of the cosmos and the processes governing nature. This interpretation laid the groundwork for Hermeticism, an esoteric tradition combining Greek metaphysics with Egyptian symbolic knowledge. The intellectual environment of Alexandria played a crucial role in this synthesis. The city's libraries, schools, and multicultural population allowed ideas from many regions to intermingle. Philosophers, scientists, mystics, and priests exchanged knowledge that spanned mathematics, astronomy, theology, and medicine. Out of this vibrant context emerged a new model of esoteric inquiry in which spiritual truths were encoded in natural processes. Hermetic teachings emphasized the unity of all things, the correspondence between the macrocosm and microcosm, and the potential for humans to ascend toward divine understanding. These principles transformed earlier ritual practices into metaphysical doctrines. They also laid the foundation for alchemical theory, which relied on the belief that material transformation mirrored spiritual evolution and that understanding one could reveal the other. The fusion of Greek and Egyptian worldviews created a tradition that would profoundly influence late antiquity, medieval scholarship, and Renaissance esotericism. By reframing Egyptian sacred knowledge through philosophical analysis, Greek thinkers gave alchemy its intellectual structure. This synthesis helped establish alchemy as a discipline that sought not only to manipulate matter but to explore the nature of reality itself. The birth of Hermeticism in Hellenistic Alexandria. Hermeticism emerged during the Hellenistic period as a synthesis of Egyptian religious concepts and Greek philosophical speculation. The writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus presented a worldview in which the cosmos was a living organism governed by intelligible laws. These texts framed the universe as a series of emanations from a divine source, each level reflecting underlying principles that could be understood through spiritual insight and disciplined study. The Hermetic corpus included dialogues on cosmology, theology, and the nature of the soul. These writings emphasized the possibility of spiritual ascent through the cultivation of gnosis, a direct experiential knowledge of the divine. Hermetic philosophy thus positioned human consciousness as capable of bridging the material and spiritual worlds, a theme that became central to alchemical thought. Transformation was portrayed not merely as a physical process but as a path toward enlightenment. Hermeticism also incorporated practical elements related to astrology, magic, and early chemical experimentation. Practitioners viewed the natural world as a symbolic language through which divine truths were expressed. By studying the behavior of substances, the motions of celestial bodies, and the patterns of nature, adepts sought to decode the principles underlying creation. This approach laid the foundation for an esoteric science that treated observation and symbolism as complementary tools. Alexandria provided the cultural environment necessary for Hermeticism to flourish. As a center of scholarship, it attracted thinkers from Greece, Egypt, Persia, and beyond. The city's intellectual diversity allowed Hermetic ideas to spread widely and influence other traditions, including Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and early Christianity. These interactions enriched the symbolic vocabulary that would later define alchemical literature in the medieval and Renaissance periods. The birth of Hermeticism marked a decisive shift in the development of esoteric philosophy. By combining ritual, symbolism, and metaphysics into a unified system, it provided the conceptual structure upon which alchemy would build. Hermeticism endowed alchemy with a cosmological framework, transforming it from a craft tradition into a spiritual science concerned with the transmutation of both matter and the human soul. The Corpus Hermeticum and its early influence. The Corpus Hermeticum formed the central body of writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a figure imagined as the fusion of the Greek Hermes and the Egyptian Thoth. These texts explored themes such as the structure of the cosmos, the nature of the divine mind, and the ascent of the human soul. They were written in Greek yet carried unmistakable Egyptian conceptual influences, reflecting the intellectual blending that characterized Hellenistic Alexandria. Their philosophical tone positioned them as guides for spiritual seekers rather than manuals for ritual practice. The content of the Hermetic dialogues emphasized a universe governed by intelligible laws. They described creation as the emanation of divine thought, forming a layered reality where each level mirrored the next. This emphasis on correspondence became one of the core pillars of later Hermetic and alchemical traditions. The texts encouraged contemplation of the natural world as a gateway to understanding higher truths, presenting nature as a symbolic manifestation of divine order. These writings also introduced the idea that humans possessed a spark of the divine mind. By cultivating inner purity and intellectual clarity, individuals could awaken to their true nature and ascend through the cosmic hierarchy. This doctrine frames spiritual development as a process of internal transformation, a theme that resonated deeply with later alchemists. The notion that enlightenment required disciplined introspection created a foundation for the inner alchemy practices that blossomed in medieval and Renaissance periods. Early readers of the Corpus Hermeticum included philosophers, mystics, and students of esoteric knowledge. Its teachings circulated alongside Neoplatonic and Gnostic writings, influencing debates about the nature of the soul, the cosmos, and the relationship between matter and spirit. The text presented a worldview that combined metaphysics with practical spiritual guidance, making them a versatile resource for diverse intellectual traditions. The early influence of the Corpus Hermeticum helped establish alchemy's philosophical structure. It offered a cosmology that connected material transformation to spiritual aspiration, validating the idea that the study of nature could lead to self-knowledge. Through its circulation across the late ancient world, the Hermetic corpus prepared the ground for the emergence of alchemy as a discipline concerned with both the secrets of matter and the evolution of consciousness. Greco-Egyptian alchemists, Zosimos of Panopolis and early theory. Zosimos of Panopolis, a 3rd to 4th century Egyptian Greek alchemist, represents one of the earliest figures to articulate alchemical theory in writing. His works combined practical laboratory instructions with philosophical reflections drawn from Hermeticism and Gnostic thought. Zosimos emphasized that alchemy was not merely a technical craft but a sacred discipline requiring moral and spiritual preparation. This view shaped the character of early alchemical literature, establishing the need for symbolic interpretation alongside empirical practice. Zosimos described chemical operations using vivid allegories. His visions, recorded in his writings, portrayed the alchemical vessel as a space of spiritual purification, where matter and soul underwent parallel transformations. These narratives introduced the idea that the sufferings of substances within the furnace symbolized the trials of the alchemist's own inner journey. His imagery established a template for later alchemical authors, who used metaphor to conceal deeper mystical teachings. In addition to symbolic language, Zosimos contributed to the development of laboratory techniques. He documented early methods of distillation, sublimation, and calcination, showing that alchemy in his time involved rigorous experimentation. His descriptions reveal a blending of empirical observation with speculative philosophy, suggesting that early alchemists viewed their craft as an exploration of both physical and metaphysical truths. Zosimos also engaged with the concept of divine pneuma, or spiritual breath, which he believed animated matter and enabled transformation. According to his writings, understanding the movement of this pneuma was essential for achieving transmutation. This idea echoed Hermetic principles and reinforced the notion that alchemy operated within a living and interconnected cosmos. His synthesis of spiritual and chemical ideas influenced subsequent alchemical thinkers across the Mediterranean. The legacy of Zosimos demonstrates how early alchemy combined practical craft with symbolic and philosophical interpretation. His writings helped define alchemy as a discipline concerned with purification, spiritual ascent, and the inner dimensions of transformation. Through his influence, alchemy developed into a tradition that united ritual, experimentation, and metaphysics into a coherent and enduring system of knowledge. Pneuma, spirit, and the inner transformation doctrine. The concept of pneuma played a central role in early alchemical and Hermetic cosmology. In Greek thought, pneuma referred to the vital breath or spiritual force permeating all existence. Alchemists adopted this idea to explain the dynamic qualities of matter, suggesting that transformation occurred when pneuma moved through substances. This framework allowed alchemists to interpret their laboratory operations as interactions with living energies rather than mechanical processes. In this worldview, matter was not inert but infused with spiritual vitality. Substances responded to heat, dissolution, and recombination because their internal pneuma was being awakened or redirected. This belief shaped the symbolic interpretations applied to chemical operations. For instance, the liberation of vapors during distillation was seen as the ascent of spirit, while the condensation of liquids represented the return of spirit into form. Such metaphors linked physical processes with spiritual teachings. The doctrine of inner transformation grew from this understanding. Alchemists believed that human beings, like metals, contained a subtle spiritual essence that could be purified and elevated. Just as base metals could be refined toward perfection, the human soul could ascend toward higher states of consciousness. The alchemist's goal was therefore twofold: to master material transformation and to mirror that transformation within themselves. This dual focus distinguished alchemy from purely technical crafts. Practitioners often stress the necessity of ethical discipline, meditation, and ritual purification before engaging in alchemical work. The laboratory became a symbolic reflection of the alchemist's inner state, and success in transmutation was thought to depend on the practitioner's spiritual readiness. The pursuit of gnosis, or direct knowledge of divine principles, was seen as essential for understanding the workings of pneuma. The doctrine of pneuma established a bridge between physical and spiritual transformation that shaped alchemy's development for centuries. It provided a philosophical explanation for why substances behaved as they did and why the alchemist's inner life mattered. This holistic view helped integrate Hermetic cosmology with emerging chemical practices, forming the foundation for alchemy's enduring focus on the unity of matter and spirit. Early concepts of the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone emerged gradually as alchemy's central symbol of perfection and ultimate transformation. Early references in Greek and Egyptian-aligned texts describe it not as a literal stone but as a substance or principle capable of perfecting matter. This idea reflected the belief that metals naturally matured within the earth and that completing their evolution artificially required a catalyst. The stone represented the culmination of this developmental process. In its earliest symbolic form, the stone embodied the principle of unity. Alchemists believed that all substances originated from a single primordial essence. The stone was thought to contain this essence in its purest form, enabling it to heal, purify, and elevate other materials. This notion echoed Hermetic teachings about the divine source from which all creation flowed, linking the stone to metaphysical truths rather than material treasure. Early descriptions often emphasize the moral and spiritual qualities required to create or understand the stone. It could not be obtained through greed or mechanical imitation but through disciplined study and inner purification. The alchemist had to align themselves with natural and cosmic laws, suggesting that the stone symbolized the harmonization of the practitioner with the divine order. In this sense, the stone functioned as a metaphor for enlightenment. The symbolic richness of the stone allowed it to be interpreted in multiple ways. Some texts describe it as a red powder, others as a divine fire, and still others as a spiritual illumination. These variations reflect the evolving nature of alchemy itself. The stone became a vessel for expressing ideas about unity, immortality, and the perfection of the soul. It served as a conceptual anchor around which alchemical theory and imagery could develop. By the time alchemy spread into the Islamic world and medieval Europe, the Philosopher's Stone had become firmly established as the ultimate goal of the great work. It embodied both the deepest mysteries of nature and the highest aspirations of the human spirit. This foundational concept helped unify diverse alchemical traditions by providing a shared symbol that represented the potential for transformation at every level of existence. The shift from material transmutation to spiritual ascent. As alchemical thought matured, practitioners increasingly emphasized the spiritual dimensions of transformation. While early alchemy engaged with material processes such as refining metals and preparing elixirs, later thinkers interpreted these operations as metaphors for internal development. The focus began to shift from external transmutation to the perfection of the soul. This evolution reflected broader philosophical trends in late antiquity, where mystical traditions prioritized inner awakening. The shift was influenced by Hermetic and Gnostic ideas emphasizing direct experience of divine truth. Alchemists began to describe their work as a path toward gnosis, where understanding the hidden principles of nature mirrored the discovery of one's own true essence. The laboratory, once a space for chemical experimentation, became a symbolic arena for spiritual struggle. Alchemical operations represented stages in the purification of consciousness. Authors such as Zosimos articulated this inner focus by describing the alchemist's trials as essential for achieving transmutation. The destruction and recombination of substances paralleled experiences of ego dissolution and spiritual rebirth. This perspective elevated alchemy's symbolic language and reinforced the idea that outward success depended on inner transformation. The dual narrative of material and spiritual operations became central to alchemical literature. This symbolic reinterpretation also allowed alchemy to survive cultural and religious shifts. As material transmutation faced skepticism from emerging scientific frameworks, the spiritual dimension of alchemy remained relevant within mystical and philosophical traditions. The idea that the true gold was wisdom rather than metal gained increasing prominence, preserving alchemy's intellectual legacy even as chemistry developed independently. The transition from material to spiritual emphasis solidified alchemy as a discipline of inner ascent. By reframing laboratory operations as metaphors for enlightenment, alchemists created a resilient system capable of adapting to new cultural contexts. This evolution prepared the tradition for its later expressions in Islamic scholarship, medieval Christian mysticism, and the philosophical reforms of the Renaissance. The 7 Hermetic Principles in early Hermetic thought. The Hermetic tradition articulated a set of universal laws intended to explain the structure and behavior of reality. These principles, though not formally codified until much later, appear implicitly throughout the early Hermetic dialogues. They provided a philosophical foundation for understanding both the material world and the processes of spiritual transformation. Alchemists drew upon these concepts to interpret their laboratory operations as reflections of cosmic truths rather than isolated physical events. The principle of mentalism asserted that the universe is fundamentally mental or intellectual in nature. This idea framed creation as an act of divine thought and positioned human consciousness as capable of participating in that creative process. The principle of correspondence established relationships between different levels of reality, allowing alchemists to view material transformations as echoes of spiritual ones. Together, these concepts reinforced the belief that nature operated according to harmonious and intelligible laws. Other principles highlighted the dynamic aspects of existence. The principle of vibration described all things as being in constant motion, a notion that resonated with early theories of pneuma and spiritual energy. The principle of polarity explained how opposites formed complementary pairs within the cosmic order, a theme frequently explored in alchemical symbolism. These principles allowed alchemists to interpret contrasting substances and operations as expressions of deeper metaphysical dualities. Rhythm and causation further expanded the Hermetic worldview. The principle of rhythm emphasized the cyclical patterns governing natural processes, while the principle of cause and effect underscored the rational structure underlying all phenomena. These ideas encouraged practitioners to approach both nature and the self with disciplined observation and philosophical inquiry. They provided a conceptual framework for understanding transformation as part of a universal process. Early Hermetic principles gave alchemy its theoretical coherence. They offered a set of metaphysical tools for interpreting the natural world and provided a philosophical justification for the possibility of transmutation. By integrating these principles into their symbolic language, alchemists created a system capable of linking physical experiments with spiritual insights. These foundational ideas shaped the development of alchemy across subsequent cultures and historical periods. Correspondence and the architecture of the cosmos. The principle of correspondence articulated the idea that the cosmos operates according to parallel structures across different levels of existence. Hermetic thinkers expressed this relationship through the phrase "as above, so below," suggesting that the patterns governing the heavens also governed the earth and the human soul. This concept allowed alchemists to interpret natural phenomena as symbolic representations of divine truths. The cosmos became a unified system in which every part reflected the whole. Correspondence also shaped alchemical interpretations of metals, planets, and bodily processes. Each metal was linked to a celestial body, and these correspondences extended to psychological and spiritual attributes. Gold, associated with the sun, represented perfection and illumination. Silver, linked to the moon, symbolized purity and reflection. These associations provided a symbolic vocabulary for understanding the stages of the great work, allowing practitioners to organize their observations within a coherent cosmological framework. The architectural view of the cosmos as layered and interconnected supported the idea of spiritual ascent. Alchemists believed that by understanding the correspondences embedded in nature, they could trace the pathways connecting the material world to higher realms. This belief encouraged the study of astrology, geometry, and sacred number, all seen as expressions of the same underlying order. Each discipline offered insight into the structure of creation. Correspondence also influenced ritual and meditative practices. By working with specific substances, symbols, or planetary timings, alchemists sought to align themselves with cosmic forces. This alignment was thought to strengthen the efficacy of their operations, both materially and spiritually. Ritual actions thus became means of harmonizing the practitioner with the broader patterns of the universe. The idea of correspondence unified these practices with theoretical understanding. The principle ultimately provided a metaphysical foundation for the alchemical worldview. It allowed practitioners to interpret their craft not as isolated experimentation but as participation in a cosmic system governed by universal laws. By revealing the interconnectedness of all things, correspondence transformed alchemy into a discipline that sought to integrate human aspiration with the structure of the cosmos. This principle remained central to Western esotericism long after alchemy's decline as a scientific pursuit. Vibration and the concept of animated matter. The Hermetic principle of vibration asserted that all forms of existence, from the densest material to the most subtle spiritual essence, were in constant motion. This idea aligned with early Greek theories of pneuma and Egyptian notions of Heka as the animating power of the universe. Alchemists adopted this principle to explain why substances transformed under heat, dissolution, or distillation. Matter was not inert but alive with spiritual motion, responding dynamically to external and internal forces. This understanding shaped how alchemists interpreted laboratory processes. Heating a substance was seen as accelerating its internal vibration, allowing its hidden qualities to emerge. Dissolving a solid into a liquid represented a shift in vibrational state, symbolizing both physical change and the softening of psychic barriers. Such interpretations reinforced the belief that physical operations mirrored spiritual transitions and that mastery of these processes required insight into the nature of vibration. Vibration also supported the idea that transformation could be directed through intentional action. Alchemists believed that their own thoughts and spiritual states influenced the substances they worked with. A disciplined mind, aligned with cosmic rhythms, could harmonize with the vibrational patterns of nature and facilitate transformation. This belief integrated mental discipline into practical alchemical work, making the practitioner's inner state as important as their technical skill. The principle extended to cosmological and metaphysical domains. Hermetic texts describe the universe as composed of subtle layers differentiated by vibrational frequency. Higher realms vibrated more rapidly, while the material world existed at a slower rate. This structure allowed alchemists to envision a hierarchy of existence through which the soul could ascend by refining its vibrational state. Spiritual practices aim to elevate consciousness, aligning it with higher frequencies of being. By adopting the principle of vibration, alchemy developed into a system that united physical processes with metaphysical insight. It provided a framework for understanding how matter and spirit interacted and why transformation was possible on both levels. This principle helped shape alchemy's enduring appeal, offering a vision of reality in which all existence was animated, interconnected, and capable of continuous change. Polarity and the unity of opposites. The principle of polarity asserted that all things exist in pairs of opposites that are ultimately expressions of a single underlying reality. This idea resonated with earlier Greek philosophical concepts such as Heraclitus's doctrine of unity and tension and the Platonic division between the sensible and intelligible realms. Alchemists incorporated polarity into their symbolic language, using contrasting substances and operations to illustrate the interplay of opposing forces in nature and the human psyche. Polarity informed interpretations of elemental qualities such as hot and cold, dry and wet, active and passive. These dualities shaped the structure of alchemical theories concerning the composition of matter. By manipulating these qualities, alchemists believed they could guide substances toward greater harmony or perfection. The balancing of opposites became a central theme in their pursuit of transformation, both materially and spiritually. The principle also influenced symbolic representations of the great work. Images such as the marriage of the sun and moon or the union of sulfur and mercury depicted the reconciliation of opposing principles. These symbols expressed the idea that true transformation required the integration of complementary forces. This theme extended to psychological domains, where alchemists interpreted polarity as a metaphor for the harmonization of conflicting aspects of the self. Polarity allowed alchemists to view conflict not as a barrier to progress but as an essential component of transformation. Opposites created the tension necessary for change, mirroring natural processes such as combustion, dissolution, and recombination. By understanding and working with these dualities, practitioners sought to navigate the dynamic interplay of forces that governed both matter and consciousness. The principle of polarity provided alchemy with a philosophical foundation for interpreting transformation as a process of reconciliation. It revealed the unity underlying apparent diversity and offered a model for understanding how opposing forces could be harmonized into a higher synthesis. This concept shaped alchemical imagery and practice throughout its long history, influencing later esoteric traditions and modern interpretations of symbolic transformation. Rhythm, cycles, and the logic of natural flow. The principle of rhythm emphasized the cyclical nature of all processes, from the movement of celestial bodies to the fluctuations of human emotion. Alchemists recognized that natural phenomena unfolded according to repeating patterns, and they viewed these cycles as essential for understanding transformation. The rise and fall of energies, the alternation of phases, and the periodic return of conditions created a predictable structure that guided both material and spiritual development. In laboratory practice, rhythm appeared in the timing of operations, the alternation of heating and cooling, and the regulation of reactions. Alchemists believed that forcing processes too quickly disrupted their natural course, while aligning actions with inherent rhythms produced more effective results. This respect for cyclical timing linked practical work with a broader philosophical understanding of nature's order. Rhythm also shaped symbolic interpretations of the great work. The alchemical stages, often described as blackening, whitening, and reddening, reflected cycles of dissolution, purification, and perfection. These cycles mirrored mythological patterns of death and rebirth, reinforcing the belief that transformation unfolded through repeated phases. Practitioners saw their inner work as subject to similar rhythms, requiring patience and acceptance of natural fluctuations in spiritual progress. The recognition of rhythm encouraged alchemists to view change as part of a larger continuum. Rather than seeing transformation as a linear ascent, they understood it as a process of continual refinement shaped by alternating forces. This insight extended to ethical and psychological domains, where the ebb and flow of experiences were interpreted as opportunities for growth. The principle of rhythm thus connected the personal journey with cosmic processes. By integrating the logic of natural cycles into their theoretical and practical frameworks, alchemists developed a holistic view of transformation. Rhythm provided a philosophical explanation for why processes unfolded gradually and why periods of darkness or stagnation were necessary stages within larger patterns. This principle contributed to alchemy's resilience as a symbolic system capable of guiding practitioners through the complexities of both nature and the inner self. Cause and effect in Hermetic causality. The principle of cause and effect asserted that all phenomena arise from definite origins and follow intelligible patterns. In the Hermetic worldview, nothing occurred by chance, and every transformation stemmed from a systematic chain of conditions. This understanding shaped alchemical thought by encouraging practitioners to view both natural processes and inner experiences as outcomes of identifiable causes. The universe, in this perspective, operated according to laws that could be studied, interpreted, and ultimately harnessed through disciplined inquiry. In laboratory practice, the principle reinforced the importance of observation and experimentation. Alchemists recognized that consistent results required precise control of conditions such as heat, timing, and the purity of materials. These early efforts at methodological rigor reflected an emerging awareness of chemical causation. Although their interpretations were framed within symbolic cosmology, their commitment to understanding causal relationships laid groundwork for later scientific approaches. The principle also guided interpretations of spiritual development. Alchemists believed that inner transformation followed predictable patterns shaped by moral choices, mental states, and the alignment of the soul with cosmic principles. Just as physical substances reacted according to natural laws, the human psyche responded to conditions that either supported or hindered growth. This view encouraged ethical discipline and self-awareness as essential components of the great work. Cause and effect further supported the integration of alchemy with broader philosophical traditions. Hermetic texts describe the cosmos as a rational system in which divine mind governed all events. This rationality allowed practitioners to see the world as comprehensible rather than arbitrary. Alchemy thus became a bridge between mythic understanding and emerging scientific thought, framing transformation within an intelligible structure. By applying the principle of causality across both material and spiritual realms, alchemists created a unified framework for studying transformation. This perspective encouraged systematic inquiry while preserving the symbolic richness of Hermetic philosophy. The principle ensured that alchemy remained grounded in observation and reflective practice, reinforcing its role as a discipline that sought to uncover the laws governing both nature and the soul. Gender principles in ancient cosmology. The principle of gender in Hermetic thought described the presence of masculine and feminine forces in all aspects of existence. These forces did not refer to biological distinctions but to complementary modes of activity present throughout the cosmos. The masculine principle represented action, structure, and projection, while the feminine embodied receptivity, formation, and nurturing. Alchemists employed these ideas to interpret natural processes and symbolic imagery, viewing transformation as the result of the dynamic interplay between these universal qualities. In alchemical symbolism, the masculine and feminine often appeared as sun and moon, sulfur and mercury, or king and queen. These pairs illustrated the necessity of balancing active and receptive forces to achieve harmony. The union of these principles symbolized the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, representing the integration of opposites into a unified whole. This theme echoed throughout alchemical texts, reinforcing the idea that transformation depended on the reconciliation of dualities. Ancient cosmologies also described the universe as shaped by gendered forces. In Egyptian mythology, creation emerged from the interplay of complementary deities, while Greek philosophy used gendered metaphors to explain the emergence of form from potential. These traditions influenced Hermetic and alchemical thought, embedding gender symbolism within their explanations of both physical and spiritual processes. Each symbolic pairing reflected deeper metaphysical relationships that shaped the structure of reality. In practical alchemy, operations such as dissolution, coagulation, and distillation were interpreted through the lens of gender principles. Substances acted as masculine or feminine depending on their qualities and roles within reactions. The goal was not to favor one principle over the other but to bring them into a balanced union. This process symbolized the alchemist's own internal integration, where psychic harmony mirrored the union of substances in the vessel. The principle of gender provided alchemy with a framework for understanding the interconnectedness of natural forces. By interpreting transformation through complementary qualities, alchemists developed a holistic model of creation that extended from the material world to the psychological and spiritual domains. This principle contributed to alchemy's enduring richness, shaping its symbolic language and philosophical depth across centuries. The Hermetic Triad: body, soul, and mind. The Hermetic Triad of body, soul, and mind described a hierarchical structure through which consciousness engaged with the universe. The body represented the material aspect of existence, the soul embodied vitality and emotion, and the mind reflected the divine spark capable of understanding cosmic laws. Alchemists viewed these components as interdependent, each influencing the others in the process of transformation. Their integration was essential for achieving spiritual refinement. This triadic framework shaped interpretations of alchemical operations. Physical processes symbolized changes occurring within the soul, while intellectual contemplation illuminated the underlying principles governing both. By working simultaneously on all three levels, the alchemists sought to align their entire being with the natural order. The great work thus became a holistic endeavor requiring attention to physical discipline, emotional balance, and mental clarity. The triad also influenced alchemical cosmology. Hermetic texts described the universe itself as composed of analogous levels: the material world, the animating soul of nature, and the divine intellect. This correspondence between the individual and the cosmos supported the principle that self-knowledge was key to understanding universal truths. The alchemist's inner work mirrored the larger processes governing creation, reinforcing the idea that transformation operated on multiple scales. In spiritual practice, the triad offered a roadmap for ascent. The alchemist first purified the body through discipline and ritual, then refined the soul through ethical conduct and emotional mastery, and finally cultivated the mind through contemplation and philosophical inquiry. Each stage deepened the practitioner's connection to the divine source. This structured approach reflected broader philosophical trends in Neoplatonism and other ancient traditions. The Hermetic Triad helped integrate alchemy with a comprehensive model of human development. By unifying physical, emotional, and intellectual aspects of existence, it provided a framework for understanding transformation as a multidimensional process. This triadic structure influenced not only alchemical thought but also later mystical and philosophical systems seeking to map the relationship between humanity and the cosmos. Gnosis as the Philosopher's Stone. Gnosis, or direct experiential knowledge of divine truth, became increasingly associated with the Philosopher's Stone in late antique and early medieval alchemical traditions. This reinterpretation shifted the focus of the great work from physical transmutation to the awakening of higher consciousness. Alchemists who embraced this view saw the stone as a symbol of inner illumination rather than a material object. It represented the realization of one's divine nature and the attainment of spiritual autonomy. The pursuit of gnosis required disciplined introspection and profound self-examination. Alchemical texts describe this process using metaphors of dissolution, purification, and rebirth. Just as substances in the vessel underwent cycles of breakdown and recombination, the alchemist cultivated detachment from limiting beliefs and emotional impurities. This transformation enabled the practitioner to perceive the underlying unity connecting all aspects of existence. Gnosis was not merely intellectual knowledge but a lived experience that altered the practitioner's relationship with the cosmos. Alchemists believed that achieving this state granted insight into the hidden operations of nature. The ability to see with the inner eye allowed them to recognize correspondences between material processes and spiritual principles. This perspective united the symbolic and practical aspects of alchemy into a coherent framework of understanding. The identification of the stone with gnosis also reinforced the ethical dimension of alchemical practice. Inner transformation required humility, perseverance, and moral integrity. These qualities mirrored the chemical purification of substances, suggesting that only a purified soul could achieve the highest form of knowledge. The alchemist's ethical preparation thus became as important as their technical skills, reflecting a holistic approach to transformation. By equating the Philosopher's Stone with spiritual illumination, alchemy adopted a model of liberation that transcended material concerns. This interpretation allowed the tradition to endure even as external views of matter changed with the rise of empirical science. The stone became a symbol of timeless wisdom, representing the culmination of the inner journey toward unity, clarity, and the direct experience of the divine. Alchemy as a model of psycho-spiritual transformation. Alchemy evolved into a sophisticated model for understanding psychological and spiritual development. Its symbolic language provided a means of articulating internal experiences that were difficult to describe through ordinary concepts. The stages of the great work mapped the processes of dissolution, purification, integration, and renewal that characterized inner transformation. Practitioners saw their personal struggles reflected in the reactions of substances within the vessel, creating a parallel between material and psychological alchemy. This symbolic approach allowed alchemists to explore the unconscious aspects of the psyche. Images of blackening, associated with the Negretto stage, represented periods of confusion, despair, or ego dissolution. Whitening symbolized clarity, purification, and the emergence of new insight, while reddening marked the integration of these insights into a unified sense of self. These symbolic phases echoed the natural cycles of psychological development, offering a framework for navigating personal change. Alchemy also emphasized the importance of confronting inner conflicts. The union of opposites, represented by symbols such as the royal marriage, illustrated the psychological integration of conflicting desires, emotions, or beliefs. This process mirrored the reconciliation of sulfur and mercury in the laboratory, reinforcing the idea that transformation required balance and harmony. By working with these symbolic structures, practitioners developed deeper self-awareness and emotional resilience. The use of imagery and metaphor allowed alchemists to express profound insights without relying solely on intellectual analysis. Symbols such as the phoenix, Ouroboros, and Philosopher's Stone conveyed complex ideas about rebirth, cyclical growth, and the attainment of wholeness. These images served as psychological tools that guided practitioners through the intricacies of inner transformation. The symbolic richness of alchemy made it adaptable to various philosophical and cultural contexts. By framing personal growth within the structure of the great work, alchemy provided a comprehensive model for psycho-spiritual development. Its symbolic language offered a means of interpreting internal experiences, while its philosophical principles explained the mechanisms underlying transformation. This model influenced later mystical traditions, depth psychology, and modern esoteric systems, demonstrating alchemy's lasting relevance as a guide for understanding the human psyche and its potential for profound change. The transmission of Hermetic knowledge into the Islamic Golden Age. The expansion of the Islamic caliphates created a vast intellectual network stretching from Spain to Central Asia, enabling the preservation and transformation of earlier Greek and Egyptian knowledge. Scholars within this cultural sphere inherited the Hermetic and alchemical traditions through translations of Greek, Coptic, and Syriac manuscripts. These translations formed the backbone of a new era in which alchemy shifted from mystical speculation toward systematic experimentation. The translation movement centered in Baghdad made works associated with Hermes, Aristotle, and Hellenistic alchemists accessible to a wide scholarly audience. Islamic thinkers did not merely preserve Hermetic knowledge but significantly expanded it. They approached alchemy with a methodological discipline influenced by Quranic cosmology, Aristotelian logic, and emerging scientific inquiry. This blend produced a distinctive form of alchemical philosophy that sought coherence between spiritual insights and empirical observation. Alchemical concepts such as balance, harmony, and hidden essences were reinterpreted within a framework that emphasized natural causation and observable processes. This intellectual environment supported the growth of specialized laboratories where scholars experimented with distillation, crystallization, and reactive transformations of minerals. The systematic nature of these investigations contributed to an evolving understanding of chemical substances and their properties. Alchemy retained its symbolic and metaphysical dimensions, yet its practitioners increasingly valued reproducibility and precision. This shift laid the foundations for later developments in chemistry while preserving the core Hermetic belief in the unity of matter and spirit. The Islamic Golden Age also contributed to the preservation of esoteric traditions. Sufi mystics embraced aspects of alchemical symbolism as metaphors for spiritual purification, creating a parallel tradition of inner alchemy grounded in devotional practice. Their writings describe the soul's journey through stages of dissolution, illumination, and unity with the divine. These teachings reinforce the connection between alchemical transformation and the quest for inner perfection. Through translation, adaptation, and innovation, Islamic scholars created a bridge between antiquity and medieval Europe. Their work ensured the survival of Hermetic and alchemical texts while transforming them into a disciplined field of inquiry. This transmission played a crucial role in shaping the intellectual conditions that allowed alchemy to flourish in later centuries, demonstrating its ability to evolve across cultural and religious boundaries. Jabir ibn Hayyan and the systematization of alchemical science. Jabir ibn Hayyan, often Latinized as Jabir, stands as one of the most influential figures in the history of alchemy. Living in the 8th and 9th centuries, he synthesized Greek, Egyptian, and Islamic knowledge into a comprehensive system that shaped the development of both alchemy and early chemistry. His writings, attributed to a wide corpus, combined practical laboratory methods with intricate metaphysical theories, creating a discipline grounded in observation, experimentation, and symbolic interpretation. Jabir emphasized the importance of precise measurement and careful procedure. His works describe detailed processes for distillation, calcination, crystallization, and purification of substances. He introduced instruments that allowed greater control over reactions, marking a shift toward more rigorous scientific methods. This focus on reproducibility distinguished his approach from earlier alchemical traditions that relied heavily on metaphor and secrecy. His methodical techniques influenced later Islamic and European alchemists. At the philosophical level, Jabir developed a theory of balance based on the qualities of hot, cold, dry, and moist. He argued that substances could be transformed by altering these qualities, echoing Aristotelian elemental theory. This idea provided a rational framework for understanding transmutation and aligned with Hermetic concepts of hidden essences. Jabir's integration of metaphysics and empirical observation created a coherent model that explained both physical and spiritual transformation. Jabir also explored the symbolic dimensions of alchemy. He used metaphorical language to describe the purification of the soul, linking inner ethical discipline with successful laboratory work. This dual focus preserved the esoteric character of alchemy while elevating its scientific aspirations. His writings suggested that mastery of alchemy required harmony between the intellect, the will, and the practitioner's moral state, reinforcing the holistic nature of the tradition. The systematization achieved by Jabir ibn Hayyan left a lasting legacy. His influence extended into medieval Europe through Latin translations, shaping scholastic thought and inspiring generations of alchemists. By uniting systematic experimentation with Hermetic symbolism, he helped establish alchemy as both a scientific and spiritual discipline. His contributions laid essential groundwork for the later evolution of chemistry and the continued relevance of alchemical philosophy. Islamic cosmology and the refinement of transmutation theories. Islamic cosmology offered a sophisticated framework for understanding the structure and behavior of the universe. Based on a synthesis of Quranic thought, Aristotelian physics, and Neoplatonic metaphysics, this worldview described creation as a hierarchical system guided by divine order. Alchemists working within this context interpreted transmutation as part of the natural processes through which substances moved toward perfection. This idea aligned with the broader philosophical belief that all creation was animated by a spiritual principle seeking harmonization. Islamic scholars refined earlier Greek theories by emphasizing the role of elemental qualities in shaping matter. They proposed that altering these qualities through calculated operations could change the nature of substances. This concept gave transmutation a rational foundation, transforming it from a mystical aspiration into a potential scientific achievement. Alchemists pursued experiments aimed at adjusting elemental balances, using controlled heat, reaction mediums, and mineral additives to guide transformation. The metaphysical components of Islamic cosmology supported the idea that the universe operated according to intelligible laws. This perspective encouraged alchemists to investigate natural phenomena systematically, confident that their observations revealed divine wisdom embedded in creation. The belief that matter possessed hidden potentials shaped the experimental exploration of minerals, salts, and metallic compounds. Scholars documented their results in detailed treatises, contributing to an evolving body of chemical knowledge. Sufi interpretations added depth to transmutation theory by associating material change with spiritual ascent. They viewed the transformation of metals as symbolic of the purification of the soul. In this framework, alchemical processes mirrored the stages of mystical realization, where the practitioner shed impurities and attained unity with the divine. This symbolic reading preserved the esoteric heart of alchemy even as its empirical dimensions expanded. Islamic contributions to transmutation theory played a pivotal role in shaping the course of alchemy. By grounding transformation in a coherent cosmological system and refining its practical methods, Islamic scholars made significant advancements in understanding the nature of matter. Their work linked scientific inquiry with spiritual symbolism, creating a tradition that would profoundly influence medieval and Renaissance alchemy in Europe. Experimental methods and the birth of laboratory science. The Islamic Golden Age witnessed the development of experimental methods that marked a significant advance in the history of alchemical practice. Scholars introduced structured laboratory environments where observations could be made under controlled conditions. This shift reflected a growing emphasis on precision, reproducibility, and systematic inquiry. Instruments such as alembics, retorts, and furnaces were refined, enabling more accurate control of heat and distillation processes. These innovations elevated alchemy from a symbolic art to an emerging experimental science. Alchemists documented their procedures with unprecedented detail. They recorded measurements, reaction conditions, and observable changes in color, texture, and odor. This rigorous approach created a body of practical knowledge that laid the groundwork for future scientific disciplines. The recording of experiments allowed scholars to evaluate and refine procedures, promoting cumulative progress in understanding chemical behavior. These practices established foundational principles of laboratory methodology. The emphasis on experimentation did not eliminate alchemy's symbolic and metaphysical dimensions. Instead, practitioners saw empirical investigation as a means of uncovering the hidden properties of nature. Each reaction was interpreted as an expression of divine order, and the laboratory became a site where spiritual truths unfolded through material processes. This dual perspective preserved the esoteric heart of alchemy while fostering the development of systematic experimentation. The integration of precise methods with philosophical reflection produced a tradition that valued both empirical and symbolic knowledge. Alchemists believed that understanding the material world required attention to both physical causes and metaphysical principles. This holistic orientation distinguished alchemy from emerging natural sciences while contributing essential techniques to their evolution. The interplay of observation, symbolism, and philosophy enriched alchemical literature with insights into both nature and the human condition. The birth of laboratory science within the alchemical tradition represents one of the most significant intellectual transformations of the medieval world. Islamic innovations set the stage for the later development of European alchemy, Renaissance experimentalism, and the eventual rise of modern chemistry. This legacy demonstrates how the alchemical worldview facilitated scientific progress without abandoning its spiritual foundations, making alchemy a bridge between mystical cosmology and empirical investigation. How Arabic works shaped medieval European alchemy. As translations of Arabic alchemical texts entered Europe between the 12th and 14th centuries, they profoundly reshaped the intellectual landscape of medieval scholarship. European thinkers, encountering systematic experimental methods for the first time, integrated these insights into their own traditions. Latin translations of works attributed to Jabir, al-Razi, and other Islamic scholars introduced detailed descriptions of chemical processes, laboratory apparatus, and theoretical frameworks based on elemental balance. These texts provided the foundation upon which European alchemists constructed their own systems. The influence of Arabic works extended beyond practical techniques. They introduced philosophical concepts that aligned with Christian, Jewish, and pagan intellectual traditions. Ideas such as the unity of matter, the possibility of transmutation, and the moral dimension of alchemical work resonated deeply with European scholars. The integration of these themes into scholastic philosophy encouraged a view of nature as rational, purposeful, and open to transformation through disciplined inquiry. European monasteries and emerging universities served as centers for studying translated alchemical texts. Scholars such as Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon drew upon Arabic sources to develop comprehensive natural philosophies that integrated alchemy with theology, medicine, and cosmology. They emphasized the compatibility of transmutation with divine creation, framing alchemy as a means of understanding God's handiwork. This interpretation facilitated the acceptance of alchemical thought within Christian intellectual circles. The spread of Arabic alchemical knowledge also encouraged the development of new symbolic traditions. European practitioners synthesized Islamic theories with local mythologies, producing a rich symbolic vocabulary involving dragons, kings, and celestial correspondences. These symbols encoded complex ideas about transformation, purification, and cosmic harmony. The resulting literature reflected a uniquely European alchemical identity grounded in cross-cultural exchanges. The transmission of Arabic alchemical knowledge into Europe played a decisive role in shaping the medieval understanding of nature. It introduced systematic methods, philosophical coherence, and symbolic richness that enabled alchemy to flourish as both a spiritual and proto-scientific discipline. This synthesis laid the foundation for the Renaissance revival of esoteric traditions and the eventual emergence of chemistry, demonstrating the enduring influence of Islamic scholarship on the Western intellectual tradition. The Latin West encounters alchemy. When alchemy entered the Latin West through translations of Arabic and Greek works, it arrived in a cultural landscape shaped by Christian theology, scholastic philosophy, and monastic learning. European scholars recognized alchemy as a discipline that dealt with the hidden workings of nature, and they sought to integrate it into their existing intellectual frameworks. This encounter led to the development of a distinctively Western form of alchemy, blending empirical curiosity with theological interpretation and symbolic reflection. Monastic communities played an essential role in preserving and studying alchemical manuscripts. Their scriptoria became centers for copying and commenting on texts that explored natural philosophy, medicine, and transmutation. The monastic emphasis on discipline, contemplation, and spiritual labor resonated with alchemical themes of purification and transformation. This affinity allowed alchemy to flourish as part of the contemplative life, where experimentation complemented spiritual study. Scholastic philosophers further integrated alchemy into academic discourse. Thinkers trained in Aristotelian logic evaluated alchemical theories in light of broader debates about the nature of matter, causation, and the process of change. While some scholars questioned the feasibility of transmutation, others argued that it aligned with Aristotelian principles, particularly the idea that substances could change form through alterations in their underlying qualities. This debate helped legitimize alchemy as a subject of serious intellectual inquiry. Alchemy's symbolic dimensions also adapted to European cultural contexts. Practitioners drew upon biblical imagery, medieval bestiaries, and Christian theological concepts to reinterpret alchemical operations. The notion of the Philosopher's Stone became intertwined with ideas of redemption, salvation, and spiritual resurrection. This synthesis enriched the symbolic vocabulary of alchemy, allowing it to express complex spiritual and philosophical ideas through familiar religious metaphors. The encounter between alchemy and the Latin West generated a tradition that combined inherited Hermetic principles with local philosophical and theological concerns. This integration allowed alchemy to develop into a multifaceted discipline that engaged with questions about nature, spirituality, and the human condition. The Western adaptation of alchemy laid the groundwork for the vibrant traditions that would emerge during the late medieval and Renaissance periods, reflecting the deeply interconnected nature of European intellectual history. Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and Natural Philosophy. Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon were two medieval scholars whose works significantly influenced the development of alchemical thought in Europe. Both men operated within the scholastic tradition, yet they displayed an openness to empirical investigation and esoteric knowledge that set them apart from many of their contemporaries. Their writings helped integrate alchemy into broader conversations about natural philosophy, thereby elevating its status within the medieval intellectual world. Albertus Magnus approached alchemy with a careful balance of skepticism and curiosity. He recognized the symbolic value of alchemical writings but also acknowledged the potential validity of transmutation when understood within Aristotelian frameworks. Albertus contributed detailed observations about minerals, metals, and chemical reactions, demonstrating his commitment to empirical inquiry. His attempts to reconcile alchemy with Christian theology helped legitimize the discipline among ecclesiastical authorities and encouraged further study within monastic and academic settings. Roger Bacon, known for his emphasis on experimentation and observation, viewed alchemy as an essential part of natural science. He believed that understanding the properties of matter required direct engagement with substances and controlled manipulation of their qualities. Bacon argued that alchemical processes revealed divine wisdom embedded in the natural world, making them worthy of philosophical and theological consideration. His insistence on empirical methodology anticipated later scientific approaches and elevated alchemy beyond mere speculation. Both scholars integrated alchemical teachings with other branches of knowledge, including optics, mathematics, and medicine. They saw the study of nature as a holistic pursuit in which each discipline contributed to a deeper understanding of creation. Their interdisciplinary approach reinforced the idea that alchemy was not an isolated art but a cornerstone of natural philosophy. This perspective encouraged subsequent scholars to view alchemy as a legitimate intellectual endeavor. Through their writings and teachings, Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon helped shape the medieval reception of alchemy. They demonstrated that the discipline could be studied rigorously, interpreted philosophically, and practiced ethically. Their work laid important foundations for the later flourishing of alchemy during the Renaissance, showing that the pursuit of transformation, both material and spiritual, belonged within the broader quest to comprehend the natural and divine order. The rise of the secret tradition and coded texts. As alchemy gained prominence in medieval Europe, practitioners increasingly relied on coded language to transmit their teachings. This secrecy served multiple purposes. It protected esoteric knowledge from misuse, shielded practitioners from accusations of heresy or fraud, and preserved the symbolic richness that characterized alchemical discourse. The resulting literature blended metaphor, allegory, and obscure symbolism, creating a tradition that required interpretation rather than direct reading. This development contributed to the mystique that continues to surround alchemy today. Coded texts often used mythological figures, animals, and celestial symbols to describe chemical operations. For example, dragons represented volatile processes, while royal imagery symbolized perfected substances. Colors conveyed stages of transformation: black for dissolution, white for purification, and red for integration. These symbols served both as practical mnemonics and as metaphors for inner transformation. Understanding their layered meanings required both technical knowledge and spiritual insight. Practitioners also employed riddles, emblems, and elaborate imagery to conceal their methods. Works such as the Rosarium Philosophorum and the illuminated manuscripts of the period depicted alchemical stages through intricate scenes that blended Christian, classical, and astrological motifs. These images functioned as visual commentaries on alchemical operations, guiding the initiated while obscuring the teachings from casual readers. This visual tradition became a hallmark of Western alchemy. The rise of secrecy also reflected concerns about the ethical implications of alchemy. Practitioners believed that knowledge of transformative processes should be restricted to those morally prepared to use it responsibly. The ability to alter substances, heal wounds, or create potent elixirs required self-discipline and spiritual maturity. Coded texts thus served as filters, admitting only dedicated students capable of penetrating their symbolic layers. This selective transmission preserved the integrity of the tradition. The secret tradition shaped the evolution of alchemy by emphasizing interpretation, symbolism, and moral responsibility. It transformed alchemical literature into a sophisticated art form that conveyed complex ideas through multilayered symbolism. This approach ensured that alchemy remained a discipline of both intellect and intuition, requiring practitioners to unite analytical skill with inner awareness. The legacy of coded texts continues to influence the modern understanding of alchemy as a symbolic and transformative art. Alchemy and Christian mysticism. As alchemy spread through medieval Europe, it became increasingly intertwined with Christian mysticism. Practitioners reinterpreted alchemical processes in light of Christian doctrines, viewing transformation as a manifestation of divine grace. The pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone became a metaphor for spiritual rebirth, echoing themes of purification, redemption, and resurrection found in biblical narratives. This synthesis allowed alchemists to integrate their work with the dominant religious framework of their time. Christian mystics saw in alchemy a symbolic language capable of expressing profound spiritual truths. The stages of the great work corresponded to the spiritual journey. Negretto reflected the dark night of the soul, albedo symbolized purification through divine illumination, and rubetto represented union with God. These parallels enriched both traditions, allowing practitioners to articulate the inner processes of contemplation and divine encounter through alchemical metaphors. Alchemy also contributed to Christian devotional practices. Some mystics used alchemical imagery in their meditations, drawing upon symbols of fire, light, and transformation to deepen their spiritual experience. The concept of inner purification aligned closely with monastic ideals of asceticism and virtue. This integration fostered a view of alchemy as a discipline that supported spiritual growth rather than competing with theological orthodoxy. Theological debates further shaped the relationship between alchemy and Christianity. Some authorities expressed concern that attempts to manipulate nature risked overstepping divine boundaries. Others argued that alchemical pursuit reflected humanity's role as co-creator with God, participating in the refinement of creation. These discussions encouraged careful interpretation of alchemical teachings, emphasizing their symbolic and ethical dimensions rather than literal attempts to produce gold. The integration of alchemy with Christian mysticism enriched the symbolic and philosophical foundations of both traditions. It allowed practitioners to explore the mysteries of transformation within a framework that honored both material and spiritual realities. This synthesis contributed to the resilience of alchemical thought, enabling it to persist through periods of intellectual change while preserving its core focus on the pursuit of perfection. The Philosopher's Stone is the image of Christ within. In late medieval and early Renaissance Europe, the Philosopher's Stone became increasingly associated with the figure of Christ. This interpretation reflected the belief that alchemy expressed universal truths mirrored in Christian theology. The stone, representing perfection, incorruptibility, and spiritual illumination, paralleled the qualities attributed to Christ as the divine mediator and redeemer. This correspondence allowed alchemists to integrate their symbolic practices with core Christian doctrines. The identification of the stone with Christ emphasized the theme of inner transformation. Just as Christ restored humanity through spiritual renewal, the stone symbolized the restoration of the fallen human condition. Alchemists viewed the great work as a process of aligning the soul with the divine image implanted within. This alignment required purification, self-sacrifice, and rebirth, concepts central to both alchemical practice and Christian mysticism. The stone thus served as a metaphor for the soul's journey toward union with God. Alchemical texts began to incorporate explicitly Christian imagery. Scenes depicting the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension appeared alongside traditional symbols such as vessels, furnaces, and elemental creatures. These images emphasized that the transformation sought in alchemy was fundamentally spiritual and grounded in divine grace. The union of the red and white phases of the great work, for example, was sometimes interpreted as the merging of Christ's blood and purity. Theological interpretations also emphasized moral responsibility. Achieving the stone, understood as awakening the Christ within, required virtuous living and ethical integrity. The practitioner's character became as important as technical skill, reinforcing the belief that alchemy was a path of spiritual refinement. This ethical dimension distinguished true adepts from those who pursued material gain or power. The association of the Philosopher's Stone with Christ enriched alchemical symbolism and provided a bridge between esoteric and mainstream religious thought. It allowed alchemists to articulate the transformative power of their art within the familiar framework of Christian doctrine. This synthesis ensured that alchemy remained a respected spiritual pursuit even as theological and intellectual landscapes shifted, preserving its relevance for later mystical and esoteric traditions. Renaissance Hermetic Revival and the Rediscovery of Egypt. The Renaissance witnessed a dramatic resurgence of interest in Hermetic philosophy as scholars sought ancient sources of wisdom to enrich emerging humanist ideals. When the Corpus Hermeticum was brought to Italy in the 15th century and translated by Marsilio Ficino, it was believed to be older than Plato and Moses. This misdating gave Hermetic texts extraordinary prestige, positioning Egypt as the fountainhead of a primordial, divine philosophy. The rediscovery of these writings sparked a revival that transformed alchemy, magic, and natural philosophy across Europe. Renaissance thinkers saw Hermeticism as a key to understanding the unity of nature. Its emphasis on correspondences, cosmic sympathy, and the divine mind resonated with humanist efforts to harmonize classical learning with Christian theology. Scholars embraced the idea that humanity could ascend toward divine knowledge by studying the natural world, which they regarded as a living text inscribed with hidden meanings. This worldview encouraged the development of symbolic interpretation and experimental investigation. Alchemy flourished in this environment as a bridge between empirical inquiry and spiritual philosophy. Practitioners interpreted their work through a Hermetic lens, viewing chemical processes as reflections of cosmic principles. The great work became a pathway for understanding the divine structure of creation, blending technical knowledge with metaphysical insight. The intellectual climate of the Renaissance supported this synthesis, valuing both rational thought and mystical contemplation. Artists, architects, and writers incorporated Hermetic symbolism into their works. Emblems depicting planetary gods, alchemical stages, and cosmic diagrams appeared in paintings, sculptures, and literary allegories. These visual representations expressed the Renaissance belief that beauty and harmony revealed divine order. Alchemical symbolism became a language of spiritual transformation embedded in the cultural fabric of the period. The Hermetic revival re-established alchemy as a central component of natural philosophy. By connecting alchemical thought with broader intellectual currents, Renaissance scholars secured its place in European intellectual history. This period marked a turning point in which alchemy became both a subject of scholarly study and a vehicle for exploring humanity's relationship with the cosmos, laying the groundwork for the philosophical and scientific developments that followed. Marsilio Ficino and the return of the Hermetica. Marsilio Ficino, a key figure in the Florentine Renaissance, played a pivotal role in reintroducing Hermetic philosophy to Europe. Commissioned by Cosimo de' Medici, Ficino translated the Corpus Hermeticum into Latin, believing it contained the most ancient wisdom of humanity. His translation circulated widely among scholars, mystics, and artists, shaping the intellectual and spiritual climate of the 15th and 16th centuries. Ficino's work redefined Hermeticism as a source of universal truth that complemented both classical learning and Christian theology. Ficino viewed the Hermetica as a philosophical system that described the divine structure of the universe. He emphasized its teachings on the soul's ascent, the harmony of the cosmos, and the unity of matter and spirit. These ideas aligned with Platonic and Neoplatonic doctrines already central to Renaissance humanism. Ficino's synthesis of these traditions created a worldview in which contemplation, natural magic, and the study of nature were pathways to divine knowledge. Ficino also advanced a form of spiritual alchemy, interpreting the purification and elevation of the soul through Hermetic concepts rather than physical substances. He believed that music, meditation, astrology, and philosophical study could harmonize the soul with the celestial spheres. This approach transformed alchemy into an interior discipline focused on the refinement of consciousness. Ficino's writings encouraged practitioners to seek enlightenment through intellectual and spiritual cultivation rather than material transmutation alone. His influence extended beyond philosophy into the arts. Ficino inspired a generation of painters, poets, and architects who infused their work with Hermetic symbolism. The belief in cosmic harmony and the divinization of humanity appeared in Renaissance masterpieces that reflected a synthesis of mythological, Christian, and esoteric themes. Ficino's ideas shaped the cultural aesthetic of the era, reinforcing the view that beauty revealed metaphysical truth. Through his translations and commentaries, Ficino re-established Hermeticism as a foundational component of European intellectual life. His work revitalized interest in ancient esoteric traditions and helped integrate alchemical ideas into the broader currents of Renaissance thought. Ficino's legacy ensured that Hermetic philosophy would continue to influence Western mysticism, occultism, and natural philosophy for centuries to come. Paracelsus and the Medical Reformation. Paracelsus, the 16th-century physician and alchemist, revolutionized both medicine and alchemical theory. Rejecting traditional scholastic practices, he emphasized direct observation, empirical testing, and the study of nature as the foundations of medical knowledge. Paracelsus introduced chemical remedies and argued that illness arose from imbalances within the body rather than from astrological or humoral conditions alone. His reforms brought alchemy into the heart of medical practice, transforming it from speculative philosophy into a practical healing art. Central to Paracelsus's system was the belief that the human body mirrored the structure of the cosmos. He interpreted diseases as manifestations of disharmony between the microcosm and macrocosm. Alchemical principles, particularly purification and transformation, became tools for restoring balance and activating the body's innate healing capacities. Paracelsus developed medicines based on mineral and chemical compounds, laying foundations for pharmaceutical science while retaining the symbolic language of alchemy. Paracelsus also challenged the secrecy surrounding alchemical knowledge. He argued that genuine understanding should benefit humanity rather than remain confined to hidden circles. This stance distinguished him from earlier practitioners who guarded their teachings behind allegory. Paracelsus wrote extensively about his methods, making them accessible to physicians, students, and scholars. His openness contributed to the democratization of alchemical knowledge and encouraged a practical approach to experimentation. His philosophy emphasized the integration of physical, spiritual, and psychological healing. Paracelsus believed that true medicine required addressing the soul's condition as well as the body's symptoms. He incorporated Hermetic concepts such as astral influences, elemental correspondences, and the formative powers of nature. This holistic model anticipated later movements in psychosomatic and integrative medicine, demonstrating the enduring relevance of alchemical ideas. Paracelsus's innovations reshaped European medicine and redefined alchemy's role within it. By combining empirical practice with esoteric principles, he created a system that advanced both scientific and spiritual knowledge. His influence persisted in medical, mystical, and alchemical traditions long after his death, securing his place as one of the most transformative figures in the history of Western esotericism. Alchemical symbolism in Renaissance art and architecture. During the Renaissance, alchemical symbolism permeated European art, architecture, and cultural expression. Artists translated complex esoteric principles into visual form, using color, geometry, and mythological imagery to convey the stages of the great work. These artworks served both as instructional tools for initiates and as reflections of the intellectual climate in which alchemy, Hermeticism, and Neoplatonism flourished. The visual arts became a powerful medium for expressing the unity of nature and the process of spiritual transformation. Painters incorporated alchemical symbols such as the Ouroboros, the phoenix, planetary gods, and the union of the sun and moon. These motifs communicated the cyclical nature of creation, the interplay of opposites, and the promise of rebirth. The colors used in paintings often paralleled alchemical stages, blackening for dissolution, white for purification, and red for integration. Artists used these symbolic codes to imbue their works with layers of meaning accessible to viewers versed in esoteric traditions. Architects also embedded Hermetic and alchemical principles into building design. Structures were aligned with celestial bodies, proportioned according to sacred geometry, and decorated with carvings depicting symbolic creatures and cosmic diagrams. These architectural choices expressed the Renaissance belief that harmony and design reflected harmony in the universe. Buildings became metaphysical statements, embodying the fusion of art, science, and spiritual philosophy characteristic of the period. Illustrated alchemical manuscripts flourished as well, serving as rich visual guides to the great work. Works like the Splendor Solis and the Rosary of the Philosophers presented elaborate sequences of symbolic scenes that depicted the transformation of matter and soul. These images blended Christian iconography, classical mythology, and esoteric symbolism to create a visual language of spiritual ascent. They provided practitioners with imaginative frameworks for understanding the alchemical stages. The integration of alchemical symbolism into Renaissance art and architecture demonstrates how deeply esoteric ideas penetrated cultural expression. These visual representations preserved and transmitted alchemical knowledge across generations, shaping the development of Western esoteric traditions. They reflected the Renaissance conviction that art could reveal hidden truths, making the visual world a gateway to metaphysical understanding. Alchemy in court culture, secret societies, and grimoires. By the late Renaissance, alchemy had become intertwined with court culture, secret societies, and the creation of esoteric manuscripts known as grimoires. European royalty and nobility funded alchemical laboratories, seeing the discipline as a potential source of wealth, prestige, and spiritual insight. Courts across Europe employed alchemists to conduct experiments in metallurgy, medicine, and alchemical transmutation. These patronage networks gave practitioners access to resources while integrating alchemy into political and cultural spheres. Court-sponsored alchemists often operated in an environment of secrecy and competition. Their work was closely guarded, and discoveries were shared only with trusted patrons. This atmosphere reinforced the tradition of coded texts and symbolic language. Alchemists who served in courts produced works that blended scientific instruction with esoteric philosophy, emphasizing both practical results and spiritual insights. These texts circulated among elite circles, contributing to the mystique surrounding alchemy. Secret societies such as the Rosicrucians emerged during this period, incorporating alchemical principles into their doctrines. These groups presented themselves as heirs to ancient wisdom and guardians of hidden knowledge. Their manifestos described a universal reformation based on spiritual enlightenment, scientific advancement, and Hermetic philosophy. Alchemy played a central role in these visions, symbolizing the transformative power of knowledge and the pursuit of divine harmony. Grimoires from this era contained alchemical recipes, planetary correspondences, rituals, and symbolic diagrams. They offered practitioners step-by-step instructions for conducting experiments and performing magical operations. These manuscripts combined practical laboratory techniques with invocations, meditations, and mystical practices. Their eclectic content reflected the syncretic nature of Renaissance esotericism, where alchemy, astrology, Kabbalah, and Christian mysticism merged into a unified system. The integration of alchemy into court culture and secret societies broadened its influence and contributed to its preservation. While some practitioners pursued material goals, others emphasized spiritual and philosophical dimensions. This diversity ensured that alchemy remained a vibrant and evolving tradition. Its presence in grimoires, libraries, and esoteric circles helped shape the occult revival of the 19th century and the continued fascination with alchemical symbolism in modern spiritual movements. The Rosicrucian manifestos and the promise of universal reformation. The early 17th century saw the emergence of the Rosicrucian manifestos, a set of enigmatic documents that profoundly shaped the esoteric landscape of Europe. These texts, beginning with the Fama Fraternitatis, 1614, and Confessio Fraternitatis, 1615, presented the story of Christian Rosenkreuz and a hidden brotherhood dedicated to spiritual renewal, intellectual enlightenment, and the healing of civilization. Although fictional in origin, the manifestos captured the imagination of scholars, alchemists, and philosophers, positioning the Rosicrucians as custodians of a secret wisdom deeply influenced by Hermetic and alchemical principles. Central to the manifestos was the idea of universal reformation. They depicted a world in need of transformation, socially, spiritually, and scientifically, and proclaimed that hidden adepts possessed the knowledge required to guide humanity toward a new age of enlightenment. This theme resonated with alchemical aspirations toward purification and perfection. Just as metals could be refined toward their highest form, societies could be elevated through wisdom, virtue, and the rediscovery of ancient truths. The Rosicrucian writings also reinforced the symbolic nature of alchemy. They describe the magnum opus as both a physical and spiritual endeavor, linking the perfection of matter with the perfection of the human soul. Their emphasis on harmony between science and spirituality helped strengthen the connection between alchemical experimentation and philosophical reflection. Readers were encouraged to seek inner illumination while contributing to the advancement of natural knowledge and moral reform. Although the Rosicrucian Brotherhood likely existed only in symbolic form, the manifestos inspired real movements. Intellectuals across Europe debated the nature of the Brotherhood and attempted to align themselves with its ideals. This enthusiasm fostered the creation of esoteric societies that blended alchemy, Christian mysticism, and early scientific inquiry. The Rosicrucians became emblematic of a vision in which esoteric wisdom supported progress rather than superstition, shaping the intellectual climate of the time. The legacy of the Rosicrucian manifestos lies in their vision of transformation, of the world and the individual. By presenting alchemy as a force for cultural renewal, they helped bridge the gap between esoteric thought and emerging scientific disciplines. Their influence persisted through later occult movements and contributed to the resurgence of Hermeticism during the 19th century occult revival, ensuring that alchemical symbolism remained part of the Western esoteric tradition. The interplay between alchemy, Kabbalah, and Christian theosophy. As alchemy evolved in early modern Europe, it formed rich connections with Kabbalah and Christian theosophy. These traditions shared an interest in the hidden structure of the cosmos, the nature of divine emanation, and the process of spiritual ascent. Alchemists found in Kabbalistic symbolism a powerful tool for interpreting the stages of transformation, while Christian theosophers used alchemy to articulate mystical experiences within a scriptural framework. The result was a syncretic esoteric tradition that blended multiple streams of thought into a unified philosophical system. Kabbalistic concepts such as the Sphirot, the Tree of Life, and divine emanation resonated with alchemical ideas of purification and integration. Alchemists interpreted the Sphirot as stages in the great work, mapping the ascent of the soul onto the structure of creation. The interplay between divine light and material form provided a metaphysical explanation for the transmutation of substances. This synthesis deepened the symbolic vocabulary of alchemical texts and enriched their philosophical depth. Christian theosophers, particularly those influenced by Jacob Boehme, also contributed to this convergence. Boehme described creation as a dynamic interplay of divine forces seeking harmony through conflict and reconciliation. His writings echoed alchemical themes of polarity, purification, and spiritual rebirth. Theosophers saw alchemy as a pathway to understanding the inner workings of the divine and the struggle between light and darkness within the human soul. Their interpretations reinforced the moral and spiritual dimensions of alchemical practice. The blending of alchemy, Kabbalah, and theosophy encouraged interdisciplinary explorations that bridged theology, philosophy, magic, and natural science. Practitioners developed elaborate symbolic systems combining Hebrew letters, alchemical emblems, and Christian imagery. These systems provided comprehensive frameworks for understanding the relationship between matter, spirit, and divine order. This syncretism reflected the intellectual environment of early modern Europe, where scholars sought universal principles underlying diverse traditions. The interplay of these esoteric systems contributed significantly to the resilience of alchemical thought. By integrating Jewish mysticism and Christian theology with Hermetic and alchemical principles, practitioners created a rich symbolic and philosophical tapestry. This fusion allowed alchemy to adapt to changing intellectual climates and ensured its influence on later occult movements, philosophical writings, and spiritual traditions that sought to unite metaphysical insight with practical transformation. Jacob Boehme and the interiorization of alchemical mysticism. Jacob Boehme, the 17th-century German mystic, transformed alchemy by shifting its center of gravity from external processes to the inner life of the soul. His writings presented creation as the unfolding of divine qualities through conflict, tension, and resolution. These ideas echoed alchemical principles while reframing them as psychological and spiritual dynamics. Boehme's visionary philosophy emphasized that true alchemy occurred within the depths of consciousness, where divine light struggled against darkness to reveal the hidden essence of being. Boehme described God as a dynamic interplay of opposing principles, fire and light, bitterness and sweetness, wrath and love. This internal conflict mirrored the alchemical process, in which substances were broken down and recombined to reveal their perfected form. Boehme's metaphors of burning, dissolving, and renewing provided a symbolic framework that paralleled the stages of the great work. Through these images, he presented spiritual transformation as an inner alchemical drama. For Boehme, the human soul contained the same divine tensions present in creation. Spiritual growth required confronting inner darkness and allowing divine light to emerge through surrender, humility, and contemplation. This process, he argued, mirrored the operations of alchemy, where purification required suffering, dissolution, and perseverance. By internalizing these principles, Böhme transformed alchemy into a profound model for understanding human psychology and spiritual struggle. His influence extended beyond mysticism into philosophy, theology, and esoteric societies. Böhme's writings inspired generations of theosophers, Hermeticists, and Rosicrucians who adopted his symbolic vision of the soul's transformation. His work also anticipated modern depth psychology by exploring unconscious conflict, integration of opposites, and the emergence of the self. These themes resonated with later thinkers who recognized in alchemical symbolism a rich language for describing inner experience. Jacob Böhme's reinterpretation of alchemy demonstrated its capacity to illuminate the complexities of spiritual life. By shifting the focus from physical transmutation to the inner processes of the soul, he contributed to a major transformation in esoteric thought. His legacy ensured that alchemy would continue to function as a symbolic and psychological tradition, influencing modern mysticism, philosophy, and the study of human consciousness. The fracture between chemistry and alchemy in the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment brought dramatic changes to European intellectual life, emphasizing reason, empirical observation, and the systematic classification of natural phenomena. As experimental science advanced, alchemy faced increasing scrutiny from scholars who questioned its metaphysical assumptions and symbolic language. This period marked the beginning of a clear divide between alchemy and chemistry, even though early chemists had drawn extensively from alchemical techniques and discoveries. The emerging scientific worldview sought clarity, precision, and replicability, qualities that contrasted with the allegorical nature of alchemical writing. Advances in experimental methodology undermined key alchemical theories. The identification of chemical elements, the development of quantitative measurement, and the discovery of gases challenged the classical idea that substances were composed of symbolic essences or elemental qualities. Chemists began to reject the notion that metals matured within the earth or could be transformed through metaphysical processes. These scientific discoveries forced practitioners to reconsider long-standing assumptions about the nature of matter. Despite this shift, alchemy's influence persisted. Early chemists inherited laboratory apparatus, methodologies, and terminology from their alchemical predecessors. Distillation, sublimation, and crystallization remained essential techniques. Many Enlightenment-era thinkers, including Sir Isaac Newton, continued to study alchemy privately, convinced that its symbolic insights offered a deeper understanding of natural laws. Newton's manuscripts reveal extensive engagement with alchemical texts, demonstrating that the boundary between science and esoteric inquiry remained fluid. The growing divide also reflected differing attitudes toward the purpose of knowledge. Chemists pursued practical and theoretical understanding of matter, while alchemists sought spiritual transformation and metaphysical insight. This divergence led to increasing marginalization of alchemy within scientific institutions. Its symbolic language came to be seen as incompatible with the new scientific paradigm, even though its methods contributed significantly to the development of modern chemistry. The Enlightenment fracture between chemistry and alchemy reshaped the trajectory of both disciplines. Chemistry emerged as a rigorous empirical science, while alchemy transitioned into a symbolic, philosophical, and spiritual tradition. This separation ensured that alchemical ideas would survive not through scientific recognition but through their profound resonance with the human quest for meaning, transformation, and the pursuit of esoteric wisdom across cultures and ages. The survival of alchemy in esoteric and occult movements. As alchemy receded from mainstream scientific discourse during the Enlightenment, it found new life within esoteric and occult movements. Practitioners and mystics preserved alchemical symbolism as a language for describing spiritual transformation, psychological development, and cosmic order. Secret societies, magical orders, and individual scholars drew on alchemical texts to articulate their visions of hidden knowledge. This shift ensured that alchemy remained a vibrant component of Western esotericism even as chemistry claimed the empirical study of matter. The 18th and 19th centuries saw increased interest in Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and other initiatory traditions that incorporated alchemical principles into their rituals and teachings. These societies often regarded alchemy as a repository of ancient wisdom that could guide initiates toward moral and spiritual perfection. Symbols such as the Philosopher's Stone, the hermaphrodite, and the alchemical dragon were reinterpreted as metaphors for inner integration and the awakening of latent potential. Alchemical imagery served to connect ritual practice with metaphysical exploration. The 19th century occult revival further strengthened alchemy's presence within esoteric circles. Thinkers such as Eliphas Levi, Pappus, and Helena Blavatsky drew upon alchemical themes to construct new systems of magical philosophy. They presented alchemy as a universal doctrine contained within the world's religious and mystical traditions. This reinterpretation aligned alchemy with the emerging interest in comparative religion, symbolism, and the hidden sciences, making it a cornerstone of modern occult thought. Alchemy also influenced early psychology. Depth psychologists, most notably Carl Jung, recognized in alchemical symbolism a powerful language for articulating unconscious processes. Jung treated alchemical imagery as expressions of archetypal patterns within the psyche, using the stages of the great work to describe psychological integration. This perspective revitalized alchemy as a psychological discipline, linking its ancient symbols to modern understandings of the self. The survival of alchemy within esoteric and occult movements demonstrates its adaptability and enduring relevance. Though it no longer occupied a central place in scientific discourse, it continued to thrive as a symbolic and transformative tradition. Its images, stages, and philosophical principles provided a bridge between ancient metaphysical systems and modern spiritual and psychological inquiry, ensuring that alchemy remained a living tradition capable of illuminating the depths of human experience. The 19th century occult revival and the birth of modern Hermeticism. The 19th century witnessed a sweeping occult revival driven by a renewed fascination with ancient wisdom, symbolic systems, and hidden sciences. Scholars and mystics revisited alchemical texts, interpreting them through emerging frameworks that blended historical research with esoteric speculation. This revival was fueled by broader cultural movements, including Romanticism's emphasis on imagination, the rise of spiritualism, and a growing disillusionment with the limits of scientific materialism. Alchemy, long separated from empirical chemistry, re-emerged as a profound symbolic language for exploring consciousness and the hidden forces of nature. Central to this revival was the belief that alchemy contained universal truths veiled beneath its cryptic symbolism. Writers such as Eliphas Levi argued that ancient esoteric systems, including Kabbalah, astrology, and alchemy, shared a common metaphysical foundation. He presented alchemy as a key to understanding the soul's transformation and the dynamics of cosmic polarity. Levi's synthesis influenced a generation of occult thinkers who embraced alchemy as a cornerstone of magical philosophy. The publication of esoteric texts and the formation of new spiritual organizations spread alchemical ideas widely. Movements such as Theosophy, founded by Helena Blavatsky, presented alchemy as part of a timeless wisdom tradition linking Eastern and Western spirituality. Theosophists interpreted the great work as a process of spiritual evolution, aligning alchemical stages with the development of consciousness across cosmic cycles. Their global perspective broadened alchemy's symbolic scope and integrated it with comparative religious studies. This period also saw increased interest in historical research on Hermeticism. Translations of ancient Greek, Arabic, and Latin alchemical manuscripts provided scholars with deeper insight into the origins and evolution of the tradition. These studies revealed alchemy's multicultural roots, emphasizing its connections to Egypt, Greece, Persia, and the Islamic world. The revival blended historical scholarship with esoteric interpretation, creating a modern Hermeticism that valued both intellectual rigor and spiritual insight. The 19th century occult revival established the foundations of contemporary esoteric traditions. Alchemy was reimagined not as a literal attempt to transform metals but as a symbolic science of spiritual development. This reinterpretation set the stage for the emergence of ceremonial magic, the Golden Dawn, and 20th century depth psychology. Through this revival, alchemy gained new relevance as a tool for understanding the human psyche, spiritual evolution, and the hidden dimensions of reality. The Golden Dawn and the re-mythologizing of alchemy. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in the late 19th century, played a pivotal role in reinterpreting alchemy for modern esoteric practice. Drawing from Kabbalah, astrology, Christian mysticism, and Renaissance magic, the Golden Dawn constructed a comprehensive initiatory system that placed alchemical symbolism at its core. Initiates progressed through graded rituals that mirrored the stages of the Great Work, framing personal transformation as an ascent through increasingly refined states of consciousness. Golden Dawn teachings emphasized the unity of alchemical symbolism and magical practice. Rituals incorporated planetary forces, elemental correspondences, and symbolic colors reflecting the alchemical stages of Negredo, Albedo, and Rubedo. These symbolic structures provided initiates with a cohesive framework for understanding their inner experiences. The order's curriculum blended intellectual study with ceremonial work, making alchemy a lived practice rather than an abstract philosophy. One of the Golden Dawn's most influential contributions was its reinterpretation of alchemical imagery as psychological and spiritual archetypes. Practitioners viewed symbols such as the hermaphrodite, the Red King, and the White Queen as representations of inner forces seeking integration. This approach aligned closely with the developing field of depth psychology, where alchemical motifs came to represent unconscious dynamics and the process of individuation. The Golden Dawn thus helped bridge the gap between esoteric symbolism and modern psychological theory. The order's influence extended into the arts and literature. Figures such as W.B. Yeats incorporated alchemical imagery into their works, presenting transformation as a central theme of poetic and spiritual expression. The Golden Dawn's emphasis on symbolic synthesis inspired artists to explore alchemical ideas as metaphors for creativity, inspiration, and personal evolution. Through this cultural diffusion, alchemy gained renewed relevance in the modern imagination. By remythologizing alchemy, the Golden Dawn established it as one of the central components of 20th-century Western esotericism. Their structured approach to ritual, symbolism, and psychological insight provided a model for later occult organizations and practitioners. This reinterpretation preserved alchemy's essence while adapting its symbolic framework to contemporary needs, ensuring its continued significance as a tool for spiritual transformation and inner exploration. Esoteric Freemasonry and the Rosicrucian continuity. Freemasonry, with its rich symbolic tradition and emphasis on moral refinement, became an important vessel for transmitting alchemical ideas into the modern era. Although not explicitly alchemical in origin, Masonic rituals and allegories often paralleled themes of death, rebirth, purification, and the search for hidden wisdom. Over time, certain branches of Freemasonry incorporated Hermetic and Rosicrucian symbolism, creating a syncretic tradition that preserved alchemical principles within a structured initiatory framework. Esoteric forms of Freemasonry drew heavily from Rosicrucian ideals. Masonic writers describe the Philosopher's Stone as a symbol of spiritual perfection accessible through ethical conduct, contemplation, and self-discipline. The allegorical rebuilding of Solomon's temple mirrored the alchemical reconstruction of the soul, reflecting the belief that true enlightenment required inner purification. These teachings reinforced the idea that alchemy was fundamentally a moral and spiritual science rather than a material pursuit. Ritual degrees within esoteric Masonic systems incorporated alchemical motifs. Candidates encountered symbols such as the sun, moon, and stars, the four elements, and geometric diagrams representing cosmic harmony. These symbols functioned as tools for guiding initiates through stages of self-discovery and transformation. By embedding alchemical themes into ritual structure, Freemasonry helped preserve the symbolic heritage of Hermeticism and Rosicrucianism. This synthesis was further developed by Rosicrucian-inspired societies such as the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia and Amorque. These groups explicitly taught alchemical principles as part of their curricula, presenting the Great Work as a system for spiritual enlightenment. Their teachings emphasized meditation, ethical purification, and the study of natural philosophy, reflecting a continuity with earlier Hermetic traditions. Through these organizations, alchemy continued to evolve while maintaining its core focus on inner transformation. The integration of alchemy into Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism demonstrates its adaptability across different cultural and historical contexts. These esoteric orders preserved the symbolic and philosophical essence of alchemy, ensuring its survival during periods when scientific thought overshadowed metaphysical inquiry. Their influence helped shape the modern esoteric landscape, maintaining the relevance of alchemical principles as guides for personal development and spiritual awakening. Psychological alchemy and the work of Carl Jung. Carl Gustav Jung transformed the modern understanding of alchemy by interpreting its symbols as expressions of psychological processes rather than literal descriptions of chemical operations. Through his study of medieval alchemical texts, Jung recognized parallels between alchemical imagery and the symbolic material that emerged in dreams, fantasies, and active imagination. He concluded that alchemy provided a symbolic map of the psyche, depicting the stages of integration that led to the formation of the self, a core principle in his analytical psychology. Jung argued that the alchemists projected unconscious processes onto their laboratory work, unknowingly documenting their inner transformations through symbolic language. Stages such as negretto, albedo, and rubedo corresponded to psychological states of dissolution, purification, and integration. The alchemical union of opposites mirrored the process of individuation, where conflicting aspects of the psyche were reconciled to form a cohesive whole. This interpretation reframed alchemy as a profound psychological tradition with enduring relevance. Jung's engagement with alchemy also influenced his therapeutic approach. He used alchemical symbols to help patients understand their inner experiences, interpreting dreams and fantasies through the lens of the great work. This method provided a structured framework for exploring unconscious material and guided individuals toward greater self-awareness. Alchemical imagery became a tool for facilitating personal transformation, linking ancient symbolism with contemporary psychological practice. His writings, particularly Psychology and Alchemy and Mysterium Coniunctionis, sparked renewed scholarly and popular interest in alchemy. Jung demonstrated that alchemical texts, far from being misguided attempts at primitive chemistry, contain deep insights into the human condition. By interpreting these symbols archetypally, he revealed their relevance to modern psychological, philosophical, and spiritual concerns. His work helped legitimize the study of esoteric traditions within academic and clinical contexts. Jung's reinterpretation ensured that alchemy would continue to influence modern thought. By presenting it as a symbolic language of psychological transformation, he connected ancient esoteric wisdom with contemporary understandings of the psyche. This perspective revitalized alchemy's significance and cemented its place within the broader discourse on human consciousness, creativity, and the pursuit of meaning. Jung's Red Book and the Return of the Stone. Jung's Red Book, a visionary manuscript documenting his inner explorations, offered a vivid illustration of psychological alchemy in practice. Through elaborate imagery and symbolic narratives, Jung recorded encounters with archetypal figures, confrontations with shadow aspects of the psyche, and experiences of death and rebirth. These visionary episodes mirrored the stages of the alchemical great work, revealing how ancient symbolic processes continued to unfold within the depths of the modern psyche. The Red Book became a testament to the living nature of alchemical transformation. Within its pages, Jung grappled with the forces of dissolution and renewal that characterized the negretto and albedo phases. He described internal conflicts, emotional upheavals, and moments of profound illumination that reflected alchemical purification. These experiences culminated in symbolic images of integration, unity, and wholeness, paralleling the rubedo stage, where the Philosopher's Stone symbolizes the realization of the self. Jung's narrative demonstrated that the alchemical quest was not a historical artifact but a psychological reality accessible to individuals through introspection. The Red Book also revealed the importance of imagination in alchemical transformation. Jung engaged in active imagination, a method akin to alchemical meditation, where symbolic images emerged from the unconscious and guided his inner work. This process resembled the alchemist's interaction with symbolic material in the laboratory, highlighting the creative interplay between conscious intent and unconscious forces. Jung's approach offered a modern pathway for engaging with alchemical symbolism as a tool for self-discovery. The publication of the Red Book in the 21st century renewed interest in psychological alchemy. Scholars and practitioners recognized in its pages a vivid demonstration of how ancient esoteric ideas could inform contemporary understandings of the psyche. The manuscript revealed alchemy's continued relevance as a model for navigating inner transformation, providing insight into the dynamic nature of consciousness and the search for meaning. Jung's work affirmed that the alchemical journey toward the Philosopher's Stone was fundamentally a journey toward wholeness. By documenting his own inner transformations, he demonstrated that the symbolic structures of alchemy remained potent tools for exploring the depths of the human soul. The Red Book stands as a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern psychology, ensuring that alchemy's legacy endures within the study of the mind and the transformative potential of inner experience. The emergence of new thought and mental transmutation. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of the New Thought movement, a spiritual philosophy that emphasized the power of the mind to shape reality. Although not explicitly framed as alchemical, many New Thought teachings drew directly from Hermetic principles, particularly the idea that consciousness is the fundamental substance of the universe. This movement interpreted the principle of mentalism, central to Hermetic philosophy, as a practical method for personal transformation, linking thought, intention, and mental discipline with the ability to influence physical and emotional well-being. New Thought authors such as Phineas Quimby, Emma Curtis Hopkins, and later, the founders of Unity and Religious Science, framed transformation as a process of mental purification and alignment with divine truth. This approach paralleled the alchemical stages of cleansing, illumination, and integration. Mental transmutation, the deliberate reshaping of thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes, became the New Thought equivalent of the Great Work, reflecting the idea that inner change precedes outer transformation. The movement emphasized the creative power of affirmation, visualization, and focused intention. Practitioners believed that by correcting limiting beliefs and cultivating elevated mental states, individuals could achieve health, prosperity, and spiritual realization. These practices echoed alchemical ideas about the correspondence between inner and outer realities, suggesting that transformation on one level produced transformation on all levels. New Thought thus adapted Hermetic concepts to a modern context, making them accessible to a broader audience. New Thought also influenced later esoteric and psychological traditions. Its focus on consciousness as a formative force shaped the development of positive psychology, human potential movements, and contemporary self-help philosophies. Although these modern systems often omitted explicit alchemical references, they retained the underlying structure of inner transmutation and the cultivation of higher states of awareness. This lineage illustrates the continuing relevance of Hermetic ideas in shaping modern approaches to personal and spiritual development. The emergence of New Thought marked a significant evolution in the interpretation of Hermetic and alchemical teachings. By framing transformation as a mental and spiritual process, the movement revitalized ancient principles for a modern world increasingly focused on psychology, individual empowerment, and practical spirituality. This adaptation helped prepare the ground for the rise of the Kybalion and other 20th-century reinterpretations of Hermetic wisdom. American Hermeticism and the reframing of the three initiates. In the early 20th century, a distinct form of American Hermeticism emerged from the convergence of Transcendentalism, New Thought, Theosophy, and the broader metaphysical movement. This environment provided fertile ground for a reinterpretation of traditional Hermetic principles that emphasized personal empowerment, mental mastery, and the democratization of esoteric knowledge. Within this cultural setting, the mysterious authors known as the Three Initiates published the Kybalion in 1908, presenting a streamlined version of Hermetic philosophy for a modern audience. American Hermeticism reframed classical principles through the lens of mental science and psychological transformation. The principle of mentalism, long embedded in ancient Hermetic cosmology, became the foundation for teachings that viewed thought as a causal force shaping experience. The alchemical quest for the Philosopher's Stone was recast as the cultivation of disciplined consciousness, where mastery of thought equated to mastery of life. This mental emphasis transformed Hermeticism into a practical philosophy accessible to individuals outside traditional esoteric orders. The Three Initiates sought to distill ancient teachings into clear, universal laws. They presented the seven principles: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause, and effect, and gender, as fundamental axioms governing both the material and spiritual worlds. By articulating these ideas in concise, modern language, the Kybalion bridged the gap between classical Hermeticism and contemporary metaphysical thought. Its teachings resonated with readers seeking a rational and psychologically oriented approach to spiritual development. American Hermeticism also emphasized self-directed transformation. Practitioners were encouraged to apply Hermetic principles actively through meditation, visualization, and intentional living. This shift represented a democratization of Hermetic wisdom, positioning individuals as active participants in the great work rather than passive recipients of esoteric instruction. The focus on practical application distinguished the American interpretation from earlier traditions rooted in complex symbolism and ritual structure. The reframing of Hermeticism by the three initiates marked a pivotal moment in the evolution of Western esotericism. Their work transformed ancient metaphysical ideas into a modern philosophy grounded in mental discipline, psychological insight, and personal empowerment. This reinterpretation expanded the global influence of Hermeticism and prepared the foundation for its widespread revival in contemporary spiritual and self-development movements. The Kybalion and its reinterpretation of classical Hermetics. The Kybalion presented itself as a transmission of ancient Hermetic wisdom, yet scholars recognize it as a distinctly modern reinterpretation rooted in early 20th century metaphysics. Rather than drawing directly from the Corpus Hermeticum or Greco-Egyptian traditions, the text synthesized Hermetic themes with ideas from New Thought, mental science, and transcendental idealism. This synthesis produced a streamlined system of 7 principles that reflected contemporary interests in psychology, consciousness, and the subtle mechanics of reality. The book's influence derives from its clarity and practicality. It emphasized the mind as the primary agent of transformation, reframing Hermetic cosmology in terms accessible to readers unfamiliar with classical esoteric literature. This focus on mental transmutation aligned with the broader cultural trend toward self-help philosophies that emphasize the power of thought. In doing so, the Kybalion transformed ancient Hermetic principles into practical tools for personal development. Despite its modern framing, the Kybalion retained echoes of classical Hermetic thought. Its emphasis on universal laws, cosmic correspondence, and the unity of matter and spirit reflected ideas present in the ancient texts. However, the work omitted ritual, mythological, and theological components central to earlier Hermeticism. Instead, it presented a metaphysical system grounded in abstract principles rather than symbolic narratives, making it more accessible but less historically representative of the original tradition. The text's anonymous authorship contributed to its mystique. While most scholars attribute the book to William Walker Atkinson, the use of the pseudonym Three Initiates invoked the tradition of hidden masters and esoteric lineages. This framing lent the work an aura of authority and continuity with ancient teachings, even as it diverged significantly from traditional Hermetic sources. The blending of secrecy with accessibility proved compelling to readers seeking both mystery and practical guidance. The Kybalion stands as a landmark in the modern evolution of alchemical and Hermetic thought. By reinterpreting classical principles through a psychological and metaphysical lens, it contributed to the resurgence of Hermeticism in the 20th and 21st centuries. Its teachings continue to influence contemporary spirituality, demonstrating the adaptability of Hermetic ideas across changing cultural and intellectual landscapes. The debate over authorship and Rosicrucian influence. The question of who authored the Kybalion has been the subject of considerable debate. Most evidence points to William Walker Atkinson, a prolific New Thought writer, yet the text's self-identification as the work of Three Initiates invites speculation about collaboration and esoteric lineage. Some scholars argue that Atkinson worked with other metaphysical teachers, possibly influenced by Rosicrucian groups active during the early 20th century. Others maintain that the pseudonym served primarily to enhance the book's mystical allure rather than conceal a genuine initiatory collective. Rosicrucian influence appears indirectly in the structure and tone of the Kybalion. Its emphasis on universal laws, hidden wisdom, and transformative knowledge echoes themes found in Rosicrucian literature dating back to the 17th century. The text's rhetorical style, combining secrecy with accessibility, mirrors the Rosicrucian manifestos, which blended allegory with promises of a higher philosophical system. Such parallels suggest that Atkinson may have drawn inspiration from the Rosicrucian tradition even if no formal affiliation existed. The debate over authorship reflects broader tensions within modern esoteric movements. Many practitioners value the idea of lineage, viewing teachings as more authoritative when linked to ancient or hidden sources. The anonymity of the Three Initiates allowed readers to project their own expectations onto the text, imagining it as part of a continuous Hermetic tradition. This ambiguity contributed to the book's enduring popularity by reinforcing the mystique surrounding esoteric knowledge. Critics argue that the anonymity obscured the modern origins of the text, leading readers to assume that its teachings were more historically grounded than they actually were. This misconception raises questions about authenticity and transmission in esoteric traditions. However, Supporters contend that the power of the Kybalion lies not in its historical accuracy but in its ability to convey universal principles in a clear and transformative manner. The authorship debate ultimately highlights the complex relationship between tradition, authority, and innovation within Hermeticism. Whether or not Rosicrucian groups played a direct role, the influence of Rosicrucian themes on the Kybalion is evident. The text exemplifies how modern esoteric writings can draw from multiple traditions to create a system that resonates with contemporary seekers while preserving the symbolic depth of alchemical and Hermetic philosophy. The Philosopher's Stone as consciousness evolution in modern esotericism. In modern esotericism, the Philosopher's Stone has evolved from a symbol of material transmutation into a representation of heightened consciousness and spiritual integration. Contemporary practitioners interpret the stone as the culmination of inner development, a state of clarity, unity, and expanded awareness achieved through disciplined practice. This reinterpretation aligns with psychological, spiritual, and metaphysical frameworks that emphasize the transformation of the self rather than the transformation of metals. Modern alchemists often describe the stone as the realization of the higher self or the awakening of latent spiritual potential. This perspective echoes Jung's interpretation of alchemy as a symbolic system describing the process of individuation. The stone represents the integrated psyche, where unconscious forces are brought into harmony with conscious awareness. This psychological reading resonates with contemporary approaches to meditation, shadow work, and energetic healing. Metaphysical traditions influenced by Theosophy, New Thought, and Eastern spirituality likewise view the stone as a symbol of ascended consciousness. It represents the ability to perceive reality through a lens of unity rather than separation. Practitioners emphasize the importance of mental discipline, ethical purity, and attunement to higher vibrations. These qualities reflect ancient alchemical themes of purification, illumination, and integration, reinterpreted for a modern audience focused on the evolution of consciousness. Some contemporary esoteric systems incorporate the stone into practices involving visualization, energy work, and ritual symbolism. The great work becomes a lifelong process of refining thought patterns, healing emotional wounds, and cultivating spiritual awareness. The stone symbolizes the completion of this inner alchemy, standing as a metaphor for self-realization and mastery over one's inner world. This reinterpretation retains the transformative essence of alchemy while adapting it to contemporary psychological and spiritual paradigms. The modern concept of the Philosopher's Stone illustrates the longevity and adaptability of alchemical symbolism. By reframing the stone as a symbol of consciousness evolution, modern esotericism preserves the heart of the alchemical quest while transcending its historical focus on material substances. This transformation ensures that alchemy remains relevant to contemporary seekers exploring the depths of the human mind, the nature of reality, and the pursuit of spiritual awakening. Comparative analysis of ancient and modern Hermetic teachings. A comparative study of ancient and modern Hermetic teachings reveals both continuity and transformation within the tradition. Classical Hermeticism, rooted in the cosmologies of Egypt and Greece, emphasized a universe animated by divine intellect, governed by correspondences, and accessible through contemplation and ritual practice. Modern Hermeticism, influenced by psychology and metaphysics, reframes these principles as tools for self-realization, mental mastery, and personal transformation. Despite differences in emphasis, both systems share a vision of reality as interconnected and responsive to human intention. Ancient Hermetic texts place strong emphasis on cosmology and divine emanation. The universe was seen as a living organism, with every part reflecting the structure of the whole. Modern Hermeticism retains this principle but interprets it through the lens of consciousness. Correspondence becomes a metaphor for the relationship between thought and experience, and vibration is understood in terms of energetic or psychological states. These reinterpretations preserve the symbolic power of the original teachings while adapting them to contemporary frameworks. The role of ritual also differs significantly. Classical Hermeticism integrated ritual practice, sacred geometry, and temple science as pathways to divine knowledge. Modern Hermeticism places greater emphasis on meditation, visualization, and psychological techniques. Ritual remains relevant within ceremonial magic traditions, yet the broader metaphysical community often favors introspective practices aligned with New Thought and Jungian psychology. This shift reflects changing attitudes toward authority, spirituality, and personal autonomy. Despite these differences, both ancient and modern systems emphasize transformation as the core of the Hermetic path. Whether framed as ascent through cosmic spheres or the evolution of consciousness, the quest for inner refinement remains central. The Philosopher's Stone continues to symbolize the culmination of this journey, linking ancient alchemical imagery with contemporary understandings of psychological integration and spiritual awakening. The comparative analysis demonstrates that Hermeticism has evolved while maintaining its essential structure. Its adaptability arises from the universal nature of its principles, which continue to resonate across cultures and eras. By bridging ancient cosmology with modern psychology, Hermeticism remains a living tradition capable of illuminating the human experience and guiding seekers on the path of self-transformation. How historical alchemy shaped contemporary spirituality. Historical alchemy has profoundly influenced contemporary spirituality by providing a symbolic framework for understanding transformation, self-discovery, and the pursuit of unity. Many modern spiritual movements draw directly from alchemical principles, interpreting them through new lenses while preserving their core themes. Concepts such as purification, illumination, and integration now appear in practices ranging from energy healing to depth psychology, demonstrating alchemy's enduring relevance. Meditation traditions often mirror alchemical stages, encouraging practitioners to dissolve attachments, purify awareness, and integrate insights into daily life. The symbolic progression from darkness to light echoes the transitions from Negretto to Albedo and Rubetto. These parallels highlight how alchemical metaphors continue to shape contemporary approaches to inner work, offering structured pathways toward personal clarity and spiritual growth. Modern esoteric systems also incorporate alchemical symbolism into practices such as chakra work, aura cleansing, and kundalini awakening. These disciplines reinterpret the refining of substances as the refining of consciousness. The emphasis on balancing energies, harmonizing inner polarities, and activating latent potential reflects alchemical concerns with reconciliation and transformation. Such practices demonstrate how alchemy's symbolic language transcends cultural boundaries and integrates seamlessly with diverse spiritual traditions. Contemporary psychology further amplifies alchemy's influence. Therapeutic methods inspired by Jungian analysis use alchemical symbols to explore unconscious material, interpret dreams, and facilitate integration of the self. The alchemical vessel becomes a metaphor for the psyche, where conflicting forces interact and transform. These psychological applications underscore the universality of alchemy's insights into human experience. Historical alchemy's impact on modern spirituality lies in its ability to articulate the complexities of inner change. Its symbolic framework provides a map for navigating emotional challenges, spiritual crises, and existential questions. By offering language for transformation, alchemy continues to guide contemporary seekers toward deeper understanding and renewed purpose. Its enduring presence demonstrates that the great work remains relevant, evolving with each generation while preserving its fundamental call to self-realization and cosmic harmony. Scientific echoes, physics, psychology, and symbolic transmutation. Modern scientific disciplines have also engaged indirectly with alchemical ideas, revealing unexpected resonances between ancient symbolism and contemporary theories. While modern science does not endorse alchemical transmutation in its historical sense, certain conceptual parallels illuminate the evolving relationship between matter, consciousness, and the nature of reality. These echoes underscore the enduring relevance of alchemical symbolism in framing scientific inquiry and philosophical reflection. In physics, the discovery that matter is composed of energy and governed by dynamic fields recalls alchemical concepts of hidden forces animating the universe. Quantum theories describing wave-particle duality, entanglement, and non-locality challenge mechanistic worldviews and suggest a deep interconnection underlying physical phenomena. Although distinct from alchemical doctrine, these scientific insights resonate with Hermetic principles such as correspondence and vibration, revealing conceptual bridges between ancient metaphysics and modern physics. Psychology further strengthens these connections. Depth psychology interprets alchemical imagery as symbolic representations of inner processes governing transformation. Concepts such as integration of the shadow, symbolic death and rebirth, and the emergence of the self mirror alchemical narratives of purification and unification. These parallels demonstrate how alchemical symbolism provides a rich psychological language for describing the dynamics of the unconscious. Even neuroscience reveals patterns that evoke alchemical themes. Studies on neuroplasticity show that the brain reorganizes itself in response to experience, reflecting the alchemical belief that transformation is possible through disciplined effort and intentional change. The interplay between conscious direction and unconscious adaptation reflects the alchemical relationship between the operator and the substance in the vessel. These scientific echoes do not validate alchemy in a literal sense but highlight the universality of transformation as a concept. They reveal how alchemical symbolism continues to inform human attempts to understand complex systems, whether physical, psychological, or metaphysical. By bridging ancient wisdom with modern inquiry, alchemy maintains its position as a symbolic framework capable of illuminating multiple dimensions of reality. The future of alchemical thought in an age of information. In the digital age, alchemy is undergoing yet another transformation as it intersects with emerging technologies, global communication networks, and new paradigms of consciousness. The widespread availability of esoteric texts, scientific research, and spiritual teachings allows practitioners to integrate diverse traditions into cohesive personal systems. This synthesis reflects the alchemical principle of uniting opposites, blending ancient symbolism with modern tools to support inner and outer transformation. Digital platforms enable a democratization of esoteric knowledge. Communities share interpretations, practices, and insights, fostering a collective exploration reminiscent of alchemical collaboration across historical cultures. This interconnected environment encourages experimentation and innovation, allowing individuals to adapt alchemical frameworks to psychological work, energy healing, meditation, and creative expression. The accessibility of information accelerates the process of inner refinement and supports diverse approaches to the great work. As technology reshapes human experience, alchemical thought offers a grounding perspective. Concepts such as integration, balance, and purification provide a philosophical framework for navigating digital overstimulation, information overload, and shifting identities. Alchemy's symbolic emphasis on harmonizing conflicting forces offers valuable guidance for individuals seeking meaning in a rapidly changing world. Its holistic approach aligns with contemporary interests in mindfulness, mental health, and personal transformation. Alchemy may also intersect with emerging fields such as artificial intelligence, consciousness studies, and systems theory. These disciplines explore the boundaries between mind and matter, raising questions about identity, agency, and complexity. Alchemical symbolism offers a language for articulating these transitions, suggesting that future reinterpretations may integrate ancient metaphors with cutting-edge scientific inquiry. The adaptability of alchemy ensures its relevance within evolving cultural landscapes. The future of alchemical thought lies in its capacity to provide structure, meaning, and symbolic richness in an age defined by rapid change. By offering pathways to self-understanding and personal evolution, alchemy remains a vital resource for contemporary seekers. Its enduring principles continue to illuminate the challenges and opportunities of transformation in an increasingly interconnected and technologically driven world. Reassembling the tradition, what alchemy means in the modern world. Modern alchemy is less a continuation of historical laboratory practice and more a symbolic, psychological, and spiritual discipline that integrates insights from multiple eras. The tradition has evolved from its origins in Egyptian temple science and Greco-Egyptian metaphysics to encompass Islamic experimentalism, medieval Christian mysticism, Renaissance Hermeticism, Enlightenment philosophy, and 20th-century psychology. Contemporary practitioners draw from this vast lineage to create personalized versions of the great work focused on self-realization, healing, and consciousness evolution. In the modern world, alchemy serves as a framework for understanding inner transformation. Its symbolic stages provide a language for navigating emotional crises, spiritual awakenings, and personal growth. The Negretto represents confrontation with the shadow and dissolution of limiting beliefs, the albedo symbolizes clarity, purification, and insight, and the rubetto marks integration, empowerment, and the emergence of a unified self. These stages offer structure to the often unpredictable process of inner change. Alchemy also remains relevant as a philosophical system. Its emphasis on correspondence, unity, and the interplay of opposites resonates with contemporary interests in systems thinking, psychological integration, and holistic spirituality. The great work encourages individuals to harmonize body, mind, and spirit, aligning personal development with the larger rhythms of nature. This integrated perspective supports meaningful engagement with both inner and outer worlds. The legacy of alchemy demonstrates that transformation is a universal human aspiration. Whether pursued through ritual, contemplation, scientific inquiry, or psychological exploration, the quest for refinement and unity lies at the heart of human experience. Alchemy's enduring presence across cultures and centuries reflects its ability to evolve without losing its essential purpose, guiding individuals toward greater awareness, balance, and connection with the deeper truths of existence. Reassembling the tradition in the modern world involves recognizing alchemy as a living system of symbolic wisdom. Its power lies not in literal transmutation but in its capacity to illuminate the transformative potential within each person. By integrating ancient insight with contemporary understanding, modern alchemy continues to inspire seekers on the timeless journey toward wholeness, self-knowledge, and the realization of the inner stone.